when you're going.
We're recording.
Recording. Okay, so this is Hakhams Melech ben Yaakov, and I am with Chacham Yaakov ben Yisrael of the World Alliance of Qara'im, and this is the weekly Torah study. This week we're going to be doing Parashath the Shofetim, which is Deuteronomy 16, chapter 16, verse 18 through chapter 21, verse 9. So that's the plan. And maybe we'll start off with a very brief song. I'll make it soft, so if you want to say something, in the background, you can, and then we'll let me know how the sound is.
ארץ, 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 ארץ חול עיניו, והשמש לה כדבש נחמליו. ארץ בה נולדנו, ארץ בה נחיה, ונשב בה יהיה מה שיהיה. ארץ שנאהב, היא לנו לבב, ארץ של עם, ארץ לעולם, ארץ בה נולדנו, ארץ בה נחיה, יהיה מה שיהיה. ארץ, 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 ים אל מול החוף, ופרחים וילדים לסוף. בצפון כנרת, בדרום חולות, ומזרח למערב נושק גבולות. ארץ שנאהב, היא לנו אין לבב, ארץ של עם, ארץ לעולם, ארץ בה נולדנו, ארץ בה נחיה, יהיה מה שיהיה. ארץ שנאהב, היא לנו אין לבב, ארץ של עם, ארץ לעולם, ארץ בה נולדנו, ארץ בה נחיה, יהיה מה שיהיה.
Okay, so said welcome to this week's Torah study with the World Alliance of Qara'im, and I'm Hakhams Melech ben Yaakov, and this is from Yaakov ben Yisrael. And Yaakov, any introductions you would like to say? Anything you want to say?
My eyes are terrible. No, the only thing I'd like to say is as we read through the Parashath, feel free to jump in with any questions or any observations. And if you want to read, just go right ahead. And normally I read or Melech will read. We'll take turns reading, but anybody's free to read who can read.
Absolutely.
And, even if you want to read, English, that's fine, because we're going to normally translate it anyways as we go. So, if there's any questions now,
and even if you're not, Good.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you have any questions before we get started, feel free to ask those.
Yep.
Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Yeah, it's my first time using Zoom.
It's a little bit low, and
I'm
it's
having
cutting
trouble
out.
hearing Shaya.
Okay, give me 1 second.
Okay.
All right.
connect to Wi-Fi here. Hey, what about now?
It's still a bit
I
problematic
hear
from
you
my
okay.
side. Yeah.
It's still a bit low.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let me try to get my headphones and see if that works. You guys can start.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what I have to do too.
start. Yep. All right, Yaakov, you want to do the honors?
Okay. Verse 18. Shofetim وشوترين تتن لך لكل שעריך أشر אדוני אלוהיך נותן לך לשבטיך ושפטו את העם משפט צדק. Judges and officers you shall set up for yourselves in all of the gates that Adonai your God is giving to you throughout your tribes, and they shall judge the people with righteous judgments, or with right judgments.
Okay, I have a couple of comments that I'd like to make on this verse.
Okay.
So the first thing is I don't think we would fulfill our role as the very look at Deuteronomy 9:16, which also deals with this topic. Just for 1 second. 16. Oh, I'm sorry. Where is it? I can't remember the verse. It's 9:16. The one where it says that you have to go up to the place where I shall choose my name to be judged.
We're about to read it. We're about to read it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's in this parasha.
Oh.
Where are we at? Deuteronomy?
Yeah, that'll be 17. And
Okay.
you
Oh,
started.
I got my chapter and verse mixed up. Okay, my mistake.
Started
and then
verse
the other?
8. Ki yipalle memecha devar.
Deuteronomy chapter 17.
Yeah, no, we're starting at
16,
the beginning
16,
of the parasha. I was answering Melech where that was.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
So we're in chapter 16, and we are going to be in verse 18 beginning, and that's where we're at now.
Right. Okay. Sorry, for some reason I got my chapter and verse mixed up. All right, and then 1 or 2 other points I'd like to make here. So Shoftim Shotrim. So the question is always asked, what are Shoftim? What are Shotrim? Shoftim is judges. I think that's pretty clear. We even have the book of, Sefer Shoftim, the book of Judges, right? Each of those leaders over Israel were their main job, besides being prophets and receiving word from Yehovah, was to judge the people, right? David judged the people, Solomon judged the people, Moses judged the people. So that's clear. Shotrim is usually translated as either officers. In modern Hebrew, a shoter is a police officer. So they were the ones who, I guess, basically dealt or used took a similar role as police or law enforcement would today. If someone needed to be taken, there are cases where, for instance, in the case of the blasphemer of the name, that they're taken and they're put in a holding cell, basically, and so that would be the shotrim that would carry that kind of stuff out. The other thing I want to point, so that's a difference between shoftim and shotrim. The other thing I wanted to point out is, so it always uses, the Torah often uses the phrase, shoftim v'shoftim titen lecha v'chol she'arecha asher Yehovah elecha noten lecha l'shvatecha. So in all your gates. So we should talk a little bit about this phrase and what it means. So what does it mean in all your gates? Okay, that's the way it's usually translated. But what's the connotation there? Yaakov, you want to say anything before I chime in and say what I'd like to say?
Well, the gate normally represents the entrance or even the exit of a walled city, and it's the walled cities that in fact we have the even in Arabic we have the word Medina. Medina means a city, and it actually means a place of judgment, or that deen. comes in.
I've been in many Medinas, so I'm glad to I'm glad to finally know what it actually means. I didn't know that. Medina, right, from Dean.
Medina is just a place of judgment.
Interesting. Okay, I didn't know that.
And so when you look in the Torah, there's several places. I can't remember exactly where they're off the top of my head, but it talks about when you, for instance, when you have a son who's a rebellious son, it says that you're to take hold of him, or the parents are to take hold of him and bring him to the elders of the city, of their city. There's places where it talks about someone who commits a crime. For instance, the Rotse, the person who kills someone, and it's thought to be by accident. That person flees to one of the cities of the Levites, and it says they take him to the judge, and then wherever the judge happens to be. And then it says if he's innocent of murder, then he'll be returned to the city that he fled to. And that's why you had these, I think it's 48 cities throughout the land of Israel, so that it wouldn't be so far away for someone to try to get to without themselves running the risk of having been killed by the Redeemer's blood. And so, for instance, when you look at in the books of Samuel, I think in Joshua too, it says that the judges sat in the gates,
Right.
and that's where they were holding judgment, was in the gates of the cities. Why? I really don't know. The only thing I can think is that's where they had their offices.
Well, yeah, that's pretty much the case, and that's kind of exactly what I want to point out in the ancient. So first of all, where it says Sha'arim, where were we? Verse 18. Okay, b'chol sha'arecha, on all of your gates. When it speaks about gates, it's usually a euphemism or a I guess you could say a synonym by extension of a city. That's what it means. So in all your, whenever you see the word sha'arim in that context, it means in your cities, right? So you have you have the main city, which ends up being Jerusalem, and that's where the main judgment takes place, as we'll see in a couple of verses. So I thought it was back in the past, but we'll see in a couple of verses. And then you have the judgment that's taking place b'chol sha'arecha, in your other cities. So this is the main point of judgment, the Supreme Court, which basically sits in the place which eventually will be revealed to be Jerusalem, but ostensibly wherever the tabernacle is. And then you have the you could say the minor courts, or the lower courts, which sit in the sha'arim, which sit in the cities. Now, in the ancient city, and the reason it uses the word sha'arim for cities is because there were two types of cities. Okay, there was a walled city, which is called an ir, and then there was an unwalled city, and they call those the prazot. You can see that in the book of Esther, right? So the walled cities had walls around them, obviously, as Jerusalem does today. And the walls were basically hermetically sealed. I mean, the walls were there for a reason, obviously, and the reason those walls were there were to keep out enemies and to keep people from going in and out at will, right? And a walled city was considered a protected city. And of course, if there are walls, then you have to be able to get in and out of the city somehow, and therefore you have the gates. So these gates were, the idea of a walled city and the idea of gates, and even the idea of bars and locks are mentioned many times throughout the Tanakh. These were a very big deal. The gates, the wall around the city, the gates within the wall, and the doors and the bars and the locks on those doors. So to make a long story short, all of the action, if you think about it, everyone's entering in and out of the city through the gates. It's really the only way you can enter in and out of the city. And so therefore, these were kind of like the public squares, the main public squares of these walled cities. And that's where all the action took place. When you entered into the gate, you usually had a lot going on there. You had the marketplace nearby. You had the so-called, the quote-unquote municipal offices. And one of the things you had was that's where the judges sat, and that's also where the Torah readings were done. Public Torah readings were also done in in the gates of the city. So you walk in the gate, and you basically have a public square or a public forum or a public area, and then you walk further into the city, and then you're going to have the private houses or maybe some other stores and stuff like that. But all the action took place by the gates, and that's why the gates are used as a euphemism, or not as a euphemism, but as a synonym by extension for cities. And that's why specifically it says here, Shofetim, you should appoint these judges and officers in your gates, because that's where they would judge. They would judge inside the city, right near the gates. That's where all the action took place. So, and if I could point out one or two verses which I think are very relevant to this. So you have Genesis chapter 22, verse, where is it? Yeah, verse 17. So this is Yehovah speaking to Abraham again, and he says in chapter 17, "Ki barech avarechecha veharbe arbe et zaracha kechovei hashamayim kachol asher al svat hayam yarash zaracha et shar oivav." Okay, so the translation there is, because I will certainly bless you, and I will certainly multiply your seed as the stars in the sky, and as the sea upon the seashore. V'yirash zaracha et shar oivecha, and your seed will inherit the gates of their enemies. Literally, it says the gate of his enemies. Okay, but that it's the gates of the enemies, really the way it should be translated there. And so that's the same idea, meaning that the descendants of Abraham are blessed, that they're going to conquer the cities of their enemies. And that's exactly what we see happening, right? In the book of Joshua and further on in the Tanakh, we actually go ahead, and that prophecy fulfilled when the children of Israel enter the land of Israel and start conquering the Canaanite/Amorite cities. So a lot more to say about this. I'll say one more verse, end of, it's at the very end of how do you say in English again? Mishlei, of Proverbs. And right, famous verse, right? The rabbis sing this verse every Shabbat meal. I'm sorry, every Friday night Shabbat meal, I should say, and it's the poem of Eshet Chayil, who was written by who, by the way? Shai, you want to take a guess? Who wrote this poem at the end of Proverbs?
At the end of it?
Yeah.
Lemuel.
Well, who wrote Proverbs? Apparently.
Oh, King Solomon.
Right. So who wrote this poem at the end of Proverbs?
At 31?
Yeah.
He did.
Wrong.
Or
That's
King,
what everybody says.
King
Lemuel.
King Lemuel.
Exactly. It's a trick question. Yeah. I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to embarrass you. I thought for many years it was King Solomon. And I was reading it one day, and it said, listen, Divrei Lemuel Melech Masa Asher Yisratu Imo.
Oh, yeah, I see it. Yeah.
Yisratu Imo. Right. So it's Muel, the king of Masa, whatever that is. At any rate, so at the very end, or right near the very end, and if I can find it here.
Who was he exactly?
I have no idea.
I have no idea.
I haven't a clue. I'm sure it's listed somewhere in Wikipedia. Right, exactly. But Solomon often quotes, if you read through Mishlei, he'll often say that he's quoting someone else, and then he'll give certain proverbs. But, all right, let me see if I can find this verse right here. Here we go. Noda b'sha'at, there it is. It's Proverbs chapter 31, verse 23. Noda b'sha'arim ba'ala b'shifto im ziknei aretz. So we see here that I'll translate it. Her husband is well known in the gates.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I remember that.
Right. B'shifto im ziknei aretz, as he sits, or when he sits among the elders of the land. Okay, so again, we see this reference again to the gates. We see the elders of the land are sitting in the gates, right? Are sitting in the gates, and that's where all the action took place. That was the Facebook of ancient times, or the television of ancient times. All the action took place right inside the gates of the city. And by the way, in modern Jerusalem, you can kind of see the same thing. when you enter, for instance, there are a number of gates where you enter, and those are big kind of gathering areas. There's a lot of activity there. If you enter Jaffa Gate in Jerusalem, right there's a whole bunch of stores. There's a big tower there. They call it the Tower of David. It's not really the Tower of David, but that's what it's called. And a lot of stores there. There's a big plaza there. It's a big meeting place. Right across, when you go out, there's a big mall that they built over the past couple of years. So right inside the gate is where a lot of the action takes place. Same up if you enter what's called Shara Ashpot. They usually translate that as dung gate. That's down by the western wall. You walk right inside Shara Ashpot, and again, there's a lot going on there. That's right near the western wall. So it's a big gathering place. There's a lot of activity there. So even in
I got a question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is enter thy gates ever used in a I know how we use it in this context about talk about the gates in the city, but is it ever used in the context of meaning like something else in the scriptures?
Entering into the gates. I'm trying to think if I could think of an example offhand. Not anything that comes to mind. No. The only thing it's really used for by extension is again meaning a city. When it speaks about Sha'arim, it's speaking about the various cities. I can't think of. It does speak about entering the gates of heaven. Sha'arei Shamayim, the gates of heaven.
It says if they're open.
Right.
Oh no! It says if the gates of the how does it go? If the gates of the nobles are closed, and surely the gates of heaven are open, or something like that. I forgot.
I don't know. Where's that from? Anyway,
I just wanted to make sure. That's all.
Yeah,
that's in it's a song somewhere. I have to look it up.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, it's sung throughout the Middle East in both Hebrew, Arabic, and even Aramaic. Surprisingly, I'll find it.
Right. Anyway, this whole idea of a walled city and gates, and there's so many references throughout the Tanakh dealing with walled cities. The breach of a wall was, it was considered basically a betrayal by God, or after people have betrayed God, so He'll pay them back by allowing their walls to be breached. It's so in that sense, it's also used, that it as kind of a punishment for betrayal, that your walls the walls of your city will be torn down or breached. In ancient times, if one nation conquered another nation, one of the things they would do is destroy the walls. They would rip down the walls of the city, right? We see that with when the Israelites. That's right. And burn the gates, right? We see that or burn the doors of the gates. We see that when Israel enters the land, that the famous walls come tumbling down of Jericho, right? The walls are destroyed. Once the walls of a city are destroyed, then that's it. It has no more protection. So these analogies of a city, wall around the city, gate, door, the doors of the gates, the Rav Ubariach, the bars and the manul and the locks of the door. This is imagery that's used countless times throughout the Tanakh. So anyway, we can go on, I guess, to the next verse.
Yeah. Anyone wants also, I'd like to point out too that this evidently was a very, very ancient system of having judges in the gates, and also the officers. So, from even when you read of the new temple and the complex, even in the gates of that system that Ezekiel talks about, it talks about the rooms in the gates. So there's actually rooms in the gates themselves. So it's not like it's just a wall. This is a pretty big thing. It's big enough to have rooms for the judges and officers.
Our entire houses. We know that Rachav lived in the gates of the city of in the wall of the city of Jericho.
That's right.
That's how she was able to.
But the point I want to get at is even in the time of Lot, it says Lot was sitting in the gate, and the accusation that the residents of Gomorrah had, or Sodom, was that he made himself out to be a judge of the people.
Does it
and
say
that's
that
what,
explicitly?
yeah, it does.
Really?
You want to look at it?
I
Yeah,
would
if you
like
wanna
to
look
see
at
that. Yeah, I don't remember that. Wow, it's amazing how you miss
hang on
verses
now.
when you're not focused in a certain direction.
Yeah.
Wow.
Let me get to it. Yeah.
Let's see. It's in Genesis chapter 12, I think.
No, it's further than that.
All right, because 15 is the covenant. So it's going to be
It's after 15.
yeah,
I know.
it's 19. Yeah, that says in the first verse of chapter 19 that he was sitting in a Velot Yoshev B'Shar Sodom. Okay, I'll read. In the meantime, I'll read the first verse here. So this is Genesis chapter 19, verse 1. ויעבור שני המלאכים סדומה בערב, ולוט יושב בשער סדום, ירא לוט ויקם לקראתם, ישתחו אפיים ארצה. So these two angels or messengers came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate by the gate of Sodom, and Lot saw them, and he arose towards them, and he prostrated himself on the ground. So that's Lot sitting in the gates, and then Yaakov. Which verse were you talking about? I guess it's going to be later when they start accusing.
Terem Yishkavu wa Anshe Ha'ir Anshe Sidon.
Which verse is this?
Al Habayit. This is verse 4.
Verse 4. Yeah. סבו על הבית, מנער ועד זקן, כל העם
סבו על הבית.
All right, so I'll read. Do you want to read the verses, Yaakov, or should I?
Okay, here it is. It's actually verse 9.
9.
It
Okay.
says, وَيُمِرُوا جِشْحَلْأَ وَيُمِرُوا هَإِحَدْ بَالَغُور وَيِشْپُت شَفُوت عَتَى نَادَعْ لَخَامِهِمْ.
Okay.
That he came to dwell and to give, to be a, it says, yishpot shafot, which means to definitely be a judge or to give judgments.
Okay, but in all fairness, I don't think that's referring back to the fact that he was sitting in the gate. I think that's referring back to verse 7, where it says, "Vayomer al na ahai tareu." Please, my brothers, don't do evil. Don't do this evil. So, and then the response is, you've come to, you're a sojourner here. You're a ger here, and you're going to judge us. Don't tell us what to do. So
yeah, it could be. But I just thought it was pretty interesting that was one of the accusations. Here he was sitting in the gate. Why he was sitting in the gate, it wasn't actually clear. But it was one of the accusations leveled at him from one of the people about being a judge. Okay,
interesting. Yeah, maybe by sitting in the gate, maybe he sat in the gate a lot, and he kind of like thought he was had like self-appointed mayor of the town, as many towns have.
Okay,
Shia knows what I'm talking about.
Definitely.
Anywho, all right, so let's go back to Deuteronomy 16.
17, right?
Yeah, it's 16, 19.
Okay, 16 and 19.
All right.
Deuteronomy 16, 19.
So it says, "Lo tateh mishpat, lo takir panim, lo taqah shohad, ki hashohad ya'awir عيني حكمين وثلث divrei صديقين." And I want to point out something here on this word صديقين. You see this a lot, that the vowel letter yod is missing in the plurals. What the Masoretes did whenever they developed the vowel system is they didn't alter the text at all. They left the text the way they had received it. And sometimes you had vowel letters used, sometimes you didn't. And so whenever the text originally had that vowel letter in it, that's where you have the vowel used with the vowel letter. So anytime you have, and how do you recognize the vowel letter? It's any vowel, which will be the hey, the yod, or the wow, and sometimes the aleph. Anytime you have those letters that follow a vowel, but they themselves don't have a vowel, then those are vowel letters. But
I'm sorry, you got to say that one more time. I missed you on that one from the beginning.
Yeah, the Masoretes,
Right.
when they developed the vowel system, okay,
Right.
they wanted something that they can use for the people to know how to pronounce the words without altering the text itself.
Sure.
And so that's why you have the dots above and below the letters, so that they didn't have to either add something into the text or take something out.
Sure.
So in the old manuscripts that didn't have that, sometimes they used vowel letters and sometimes they didn't. That's where you get this idea of what's called a defective versus a full writing.
Right.
Sometimes when you have a participle that should have a holum wow, you only have a holum. There's no wow there because in the original text there was no wow. Just like here, you have the word صديقين. You should have a yod meme at the end, but there's no yod there.
At which word?
That's because that's at the end of verse 19.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Verse 19.
You say which word should have a yod at the end? Sadiqin? No, not that one.
Yeah, صديقين. صديقين should have a yod meme between the qaf and the meme.
Right.
Okay. But here's how you can tell where the vowel letters were used in the original text. Anytime you have a vowel letter, then they were actually written in the original text that the Masoretes had. Anytime there's no vowel letter written, then you know they weren't used in the text that they had received. And so that's why you have.
So in other words, basically what you're saying, that in a nutshell, what you're saying is that the actual letters of the Torah were never changed at all by the Masoretes. The bottom line is what you're saying here.
By the Masoretes, no.
Right.
Who had the text before them?
Right. Who knows?
Like, who knows? Because the Masoretes, the way they looked at it is, hey, this is all we have. This is all we have.
Sure.
Our land has been destroyed by the Romans. Most of the parchments that they had were burnt. They were dispersed all over the world. And so they didn't want to destroy any part of the text that they had received.
Got it. So basically what you're saying here in the case of this word tzadikim here is that they should have, to correct the spelling, to make it compatible with other spellings of the same word, there should have been a new letter, yud, added in between the kuf and the mem. So it should say tzadi, dalet, yud, kuf, yud, mem, tzadikim. That's the way tzadikim is generally spelled. But the Masoretes inherited a text that did not have a yud between the kuf and the mem, so they left it alone. They did not change it, and they just put the chirik under the kuf and left it like that. That's basically the bottom line is what you're saying. That the Masoretes refused to change any of the letters of the text, and if they needed to make something clear, they did it through the vowelization marks.
Yep. In the Samaritan Torah, it's always written in the full. Every
Mhm.
participle is written fully. Every
Mhm.
plural is written fully, and so there's none of that.
Right.
But in the Masoretic text, it's sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Is that
Okay.
a big deal, really, or not really?
No,
Okay.
it's not a big deal at all.
It's not a big deal for understanding what the word is saying. I think it's more a technical point because you have
Okay.
you can often have, there are certain vowel letters like Yaakov pointed out. There's yud, there's hey, there's vav, and there's sometimes aleph, which
Yeah.
can drop in and out, right? Depending on you basically have a choice to include it or not, right? Because you can express the same idea without those extra added letters. And there's this term, which if you haven't heard it, you maybe will hear it if you study Masoretic text or text in general, and that's matrix lectionis. It's a fancy way of saying that it's kind of the expanded spelling where these extra added letters are added in, either the aleph, the hey, the yud, the vav, or the yud. Okay, but so in the Masoretic texts, which we're looking at right here, the sometimes the text had these letters added in, and that's matrix lectionis. It's elongated spelling, or sometimes they were left out, and that's the shortened spelling. And here we have an example where it's left out. In that last word in verse 19, tzadikim, there should be, or there could be a yud between the kuf and the mem. In other words, the two last letters of the word tzadikim could have another letter between them, which would be the yud, but they don't. So what Yaakov is pointing out is that even though they could have spelled it with that extra yud in there, and that would have been quote unquote the more correct way to spell it, because that's the way it appears generally. They did not change. The Masoretes refused to change any of the actual letters of the text, and that's why the yud, even though it should be quote unquote should be included there, is not included. And so therefore, the way they dealt with that problem is with the vowelization, which basically shows that the word is tzadikim and not something like tzadikam, which would mean their righteous person or whatever the case may be. So that's the main point. Yaakov, have I kind of summed up what you wanted to say correctly?
Yep. So the translation for the verse, lo satei mishpat, means don't. Now this word satei comes from nate, which means to stretch something.
Right.
Basically, it's saying don't stretch the judgment, literally. But what that means is you shouldn't incline to one side or the other in judgment.
Well, literally, hatot means to tip over.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You shouldn't lean one side or the other. You have to be in the middle. And it says lo fakir panim, and you shall not recognize faces. Which means you shouldn't. In fact, it's actually said in one place, maybe here. Nope, not here. But there's other places where it says you shall not recognize the faces of the poor.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
So it means you shouldn't feel more pity because he's a poor man versus a rich guy, but it's also the other way. You shouldn't. And this is what it's saying here. You shouldn't take bribes because bribes blind the eyes of the blind. The Hakhams.
Right. And it's interesting the structure here, because it says, first of all, lo takir panim, which means don't recognize faces, right? So I guess it would be like, okay, here comes the judge, here come the judge. The judge comes in, sits down, and okay, bring in the two litigants, and all of a sudden the two litigants come up, and one of them standing there is his cousin. He's like, oh wow, Joe, how you doing? Haven't seen you in like 3 years. I recognize that face, So you automatically win the case, right? Because you're my cousin. So that's exactly the analogy that's being used here. Is that the judge should be blind, right? Justice is blind. They even say
no favoritism.
No favoritism. And what's very interesting is that afterwards it says that the bribery, shohad, which is a bribe, can blind the eyes of the wise, right? So here you have here you have at the beginning, don't recognize a face, meaning you should, be as if your eyes are closed. Justice is blind. And then afterwards, it says just the opposite in a certain sense, right? But it's kind of in a poetic way. It's saying that the bribery blinds the eyes of the Chachamim, so it takes away their wisdom, right? So the two opposites are being used here, I think, for poetic effect. To say, on the one hand, the judge should be blind; he shouldn't recognize any faces. But on the other hand, bribery can blind him and take his wisdom away from him. He can blind him from seeing the truth. It's very interesting the way they set it up. It's a very poetic kind of verse.
Yep, but it says that the bribe it will blind the eyes of the wise, and it says "Wisalef divrei tzadikim," which means it will twist the words of the righteous.
Distort, I like to translate salaf as distort,
And so that means even if you're a righteous man, or considered to be righteous, nobody wants to turn away money. Money always helps. So you got to be careful with that. And just to make something interesting, this really doesn't have anything to do with the Torah, but this has to do with the same concept. When Ali ibn Abi Talib became the fourth Khalif of the Islamic State, the new burgeoning Islamic State, one of the things he did was to make sure that his judges were some of the most highest paid people in his administration. And the reasoning behind that is so that they wouldn't have any want for anything, and so the bribery wouldn't work.
Right. That's a good idea. I thought you were going to say he poked their eyes out.
No.
I guess not. But I guess giving a lot of money works too. Okay. So anywho, all right. So we go on to verse 20.
Yep. So verse 20. صادق تدرس لما تهيه ويرشت את הארץ أشر أدونai إلهيך نותן לך. Righteous you shall seek, or you shall pursue righteousness, is basically what it's saying. The tzedek is always used when you have these duplicating words that's emphatic. Meaning you should definitely pursue righteousness.
Okay.
And the next word is liman.
Yep, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No.
I was going to say that's an important thing to point out, is that whenever you see, I won't say whenever, but almost always when you see repetition in the Torah of one word repeated twice, sometimes in slightly different forms, that's ancient Hebrew's way of emphasizing something, pointing out emphasis. So it's often translated something like, so I haven't looked at translations here, but if I went to an English translation, it would be translated something along the lines of you shall certainly pursue justice, right? The emphasis. Let's even look here for 1 second at let's get the English translation for a second. So that was Deuteronomy, sorry, what verse is that? 20, right?
20, yeah.
20, I'll take the NIV, that's the one I always like to refer to. And so it says, oh, interesting. It says, follow justice and justice alone. Interesting translation. But again, it points there. They actually did the repetition to kind of replicate the Hebrew. But if I went to a more standard, let's take the King James. Here you go to verse 20. Then you get that which is altogether just shalt thou follow. So that's the emphasis, right? The tzedek is translated here as altogether just, right? Not just just. If we're just tzedek tirdof, it would say something like that which is just shalt thou follow. But here it's tzedek, it's the repetition representing emphasis. And so the King James Version translated as that which is altogether just thou shalt follow. So important point for all those getting started on reading Torah, that repetition implies emphasis.
Yeah. So, tzedek, tirdof. So you shall certainly follow after or pursue righteousness. Lima'an is always used as a consequential action. It means it means because, but it means because as a consequence of something you've done or not done.
In order that.
Yeah. Tehye means you will live. This is the word chaya. وَيَرَشْتَ et ha'aretz, and you will inherit the land that Adonai your God is giving to you.
And again, this kind of sums up the theme that we've been seeing all along in the book of Deuteronomy, which is if you follow my mitzvot, then you will be blessed. If you do not follow my mitzvot, then you will be cursed. So if you do justice in the land, then you will live, you will inherit the land on a permanent basis. And if you don't, then the opposite is clear.
Gone.
And just one more point is to notice how different this is from the rabbis. If you go to a typical rabbi and say, well, what are the most important mitzvot in the Torah? So, Shai, I don't know how well you know rabbinical Judaism. If you're lucky, not too well.
I'm just jumping out the porch. I'm learning, man.
No. Melech.
Rabbinical Judaism, yeah.
خطب حبو قرحازي كي هو قرأ مشنا كل بخير.
Okay. All right. Okay, got it. All right. Well, so I would like to point out then, since you learn the Mishnah every morning, and I understand you're a rabbinical Jew, and that's fine. We're not. That's totally fine. But you will notice in rabbinical Judaism, that's fine. You'll notice in rabbinical Judaism that the most important things seem to be ritualistic. So if you go to a typical rabbinical Jew, and you say, what's the most important commandment in the Torah? Then they will say something like putting on tefillin every morning, okay? Or they'll say something like lighting the Shabbos candles or something like that, okay? And it's important. Whether you're a big boy, obviously, and you'll make your own decisions in life. But whether you follow rabbinical Judaism or Karaitism, it really is important to realize the differences between the two, and that rabbinical Judaism has much more of a focus on the importance of ritualistic commandments, many of which are not found in the Torah at all. Whereas the Torah and the Tanakh always have much more of a focus on justice, on righteousness, on kindness, on being kind, helping the poor, the widow, the orphan. In this case, what's the most important thing? It doesn't say when you go into the land, make sure you put on tefillin every day. It says when you go into the land, make sure you certainly do justice. That's the message of the prophets. You pick up pretty much any prophet, it's going to be exactly the same message. Make sure.
Is that the difference between that and a Karaite?
Not only.
Yeah, I mean. That's not the only difference, but I would say that sums up the difference pretty well.
Mostly,
frankly, yes.
Yeah,
but
I was just wondering that. So, what the difference between them was?
Yeah, well, I mean, Yaakov, if you want to take this, but basically, yeah, the difference between a Karaite and a rabbinical Jew is that we do not accept the rabbinical writings as authoritative. There might be a lot of wisdom in it, and I could pick up a lot of different religious traditions and find a lot of wisdom. I could pick up Hindu texts and find a lot of wisdom. And I listen all the time to Buddhism, to Buddhist teachers on YouTube. I love them. I learn a lot from them. And but I don't consider them to be, when they tell me what I am supposed to be doing, I don't consider it to be authoritative. And so it's the same with the rabbis. There may be a lot of wisdom and a lot of strange things in the writings of the rabbis, but it's not authoritative. If the rabbis say you have to put on tefillin every day, then as a Karaite, I'm going to say, really? Well, then show me where it says that in the Torah. And they will try to show you, but it'll pan out just about as well as trying to prove that Isaiah 53 is a foreshadowing of Jesus. So anyway, okay. Yaakov, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I just want to welcome Bruce. Bruce, welcome to the
Oh, there we go. Hey, Bruce.
Hi, Yaakov. Hi, Melech. And hi.
Hey, hi, Bruce. Shaya.
Shaya.
Yeah.
Where are you from, Shaya?
Shalom, Achi. Cleveland, Ohio. You hear me?
I hear you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I hear you perfectly. Yeah. And Bruce is
So
coming to us from
Parashath Shofetim.
Yeah.
and we are on. This will be verse 21. Lo Fatah.
So do you guys want to take a quick 5-minute break, and I'll put on some music. We can all take a stretch and, grab a glass of water or whatever, and then we'll come back in about 5 minutes. How does that sound?
That's
fine.
up to you. Bruce just joined us.
Yeah. This is a great job. You just come on
Bruce
board.
just came on break.
It's easy. I just press buttons and let the music play. It's really simple. So, all right, let's see.
Where are you
yeah,
on Shofetim?
We're in verse 21. We're at Lo Fatah Lecha.
What chapter though?
This is
16.
chapter 16.
Oh, you're beginning. You're only beginning.
We just
Yeah.
got started.
We were talking
16,
a lot about
21.
yeah.
Well, you know us. We have lots of filibuster between.
No, we get into a lot of discussions. No reason to just rush through it, and I like to to do a deep dive sometimes and discuss. But we can move ahead a bit more. Anyway, I'll put on a song for 5 minutes. Everyone, yes,
Okay.
no, sound good? We'll take a little break. I'm going to grab a glass of water, and we can all stretch, and then we'll be back in 5 minutes. Okay. All right then. So I guess we can continue. So just for those who are joining now, I guess Bruce already knows this, but this is the World Alliance of Qara'im weekly, and we're doing Parashat Shofetim, which is in Deuteronomy. We're in Deuteronomy 16, verse, I guess we're up to 21 right now. So, okay. All right. Yaakov, you want to continue?
Yep. Let me put Damien down. He just woke up from a nap.
What happened? Oh, the cat.
Okay. Yeah.
The lions. Yaakov doesn't live with two cats. He lives with two lions.
Slobbered all over my Torah. All right.
But I hear those lions are really becoming Torah scholars.
Yeah, man.
You don't want to wait for Shia to return?
Yeah. We'll wait a minute for Shia to return. I don't.
Sure. Let's do that.
All
right.
But yeah, Damien likes to read the Torah with me. So anytime I'm reading the Torah or I'm speaking with someone about the Torah, he normally I'll sit in the kitchen because where I live, most of the people I speak with are from the United States, and so it's usually like around 2 a.m. And so I'll sit in the kitchen so I don't disturb my wife. And when he wakes up and he hears me reading the Torah, he'll whine and whine and whine and whine until I let him in, and he'll come sit with me.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think he's definitely going to be a Talmudic scholar one day.
Talmudic, no. Now, somebody asked me the other day if it was okay, if it's wrong to read the Talmud. I said no. In fact, it's a good thing to actually read it, especially for any Karaite, just so that you know what it is you're I guess protesting, if you will, or actually speaking against. It's one thing to learn the Karaite halakha and say this is what we are, and most of the times you just see a lot of rabbi bashing, and sometimes it's well deserved, but sometimes you gotta really know the point you're either speaking for or against, and it's good to have the other view, because there's always more than one view, and not everything in the Mishnah is actually wrong. You can't say everything there is wrong. We don't outright reject everything, and that was never the point.
Correct. The rabbis, they have one interpretation, one opinion on the. I won't even say one opinion. I mean, it's much more complicated than that, right? They have many different opinions, but they have kind of one way of overall one way of interpreting the Torah, and there's a lot to learn from them. There's no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, there's a lot that obviously we disagree with, or else we wouldn't be Karaites.
Yep. So, Shia, are you ready? Can you hear me? You have your mic muted.
Oh, there you go.
You go. Yep. Okay, so we're in verse 21.
Verse 21.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
all right, I'm ready.
لو ثتع لها أشراء كل عيس أيتل مذبح أدونai Elohecha أشر تعسي لach. And you shall not plant any Asherah for you, and this is usually a tree which is used for religious purposes. Any tree next to the altar of Adonai your God, which you shall make for yourself. So if you make any altar for Adonai, then you shall not plant a Asherah. So it's Asherah. which is,
Mhm.
I think we talked about that last week. That's just, we see sometimes these are poles
Right.
too. They're not only trees. But.
Right. Well, there's a lot to say here. So first of all, the Asherah, as we mentioned last week, I believe, is it's a female goddess, and that's why it's if you look here in where'd the verse go? Lo titalecha, right? Don't plant for yourself. So that shows right there what it is. It's some kind of plant. It's a tree, right?
Mhm.
Is basically what it is. And in the ancient Near East, trees were always represented fertility symbols. They were fertility symbols because trees give fruit, right? And so they represented fertility. And since they represented fertility, they were always associated with they were always pretty much female goddesses, and that's what the Asherah is here. We even have the hey ending, Asherah, right, which implies, even in ancient Hebrew, if you have a hey ending, it implies that it's a female rather than the male. So the Asherah was basically a tree, which was a fertility symbol, which represented a female goddess, who usually had a husband, and that husband was either El or Baal, or I can't remember. There were different ones depending on where the Asherah showed up, but whether it was in Ugarit or whether it was in the land of Canaan, et cetera, et cetera. But they were always wives of some male god, or usually wives of some male god. And so we're told explicitly to don't make this disgusting, idea of planting this female fertility symbol right next to the altar of God. Because what would that mean? That would mean God is the husband, like Baal or El, right? Baal literally means husband or owner. And I don't know obviously Bruce and Yaakov know that. Shai, I don't know if you knew that, but you've heard of the gods like the Baals.
Yeah.
So that means husband or owner. Okay, so Baal means husband, and then his wife was the Asherah, and we're told don't do this disgusting thing next to the altar of God, because then God becomes the husband. I mean, it's bad enough just planting giving any or allowing any symbol of idolatry near the altar of Yehovah, but especially in Asherah would imply that God is the husband of this female goddess symbol. Okay, and it's very interesting. If we follow biblical archaeology, there was a find. I just have to bring it up here. They found let me just find it here. I believe it was an inscription where it said, they found an inscription that said, do you guys know about this? Yaakov, do you know about this?
What's the inscription?
It says Yehovah and his Asherah.
Yeah, that's not new.
Right. No, it's not new at all. Right.
That's been around a while.
Yep. And
Yeah.
so
I think that was found. I think that was found in several different places, not just one.
Really? I thought it was only one. I don't remember.
Yeah, because you actually have in the what's called the Elephantine documents, it talks about it there, and this is from Jews, strangely enough.
Right. Mm-hmm. But was it in the Elephantine letters? I thought, I thought it was before that they found an actual. I'm trying to remember now.
Well, they might have found one earlier than that. They found several of them, not just one.
Oh yeah.
And
okay.
And even when you have the Hezekiah seal, you have the winged solar disk, and what's really interesting is that in Egypt the winged solar disk is the Aten and Ra, and even the god Amun-Ra had the same iconography. Then when you get to Ashur, the god Ashur was also a winged solar disk, and so that was on the seal of Hezekiah, along with what's called the Ankh. So you had the Ankh, you had the winged solar disk, and those are both Egyptian iconography. But you have to understand that around that time, the land of Canaan was under the influence of the Egyptian rulers. So you see that. In fact, the point I was wanting to make about the winged solar disk, you have a verse in one of the prophets where it talks about the sun. The sun will rise, having healing in his wings, the shemesh. So here you have the idea of the shemesh with the kanaf. So it's a winged image of the sun, and it supposedly had some type of healing quality, whatever it meant.
Well, there was one.
Just
getting
throw
back
that
to
out
this,
there.
there's one particular find. There was one particular find recently that I was speaking about, but I'm not going to have time to look it up. I think it was in 2018 or so that they found in the Sinai Desert a specific. It was either a writing. I can't remember. I think it was an inscription that said Yehovah and his Asherah. But I'm looking it up right now, and it's a bunch of stuff here, so I have to find it. Anyway, so to get back to this, so that's what the Asherah was, and that's why it was considered such a disgrace to plant it next to or that's why this commandment exists here, because it was very common to plant Asherah trees.
Do you think that the totem pole and the Christmas tree are descendants of Asherah?
You know,
That's what they
I've
claim.
had I've read several papers. They're really good academic papers that talked about the idea of Odin and Thor, which could lead back etymologically to Syria. Now, the paper went on to explain that at the time, even at the time of Avram, when he came into Canaan, you know, he had a place of worship which was called, which was in the area of the Elonei Mamre, which is a grove. Whenever he was in Beersheba, there was also a grove there. In fact, when Yaakov went to Egypt, he stopped in that same grove because there was an altar there. And so we're told in the Torah, we're not allowed to do that anymore. But the paper went on to explain that even etymologically in the names Thor and Odin, it goes back to Semitic deities. Possibly. Now, of course, the normal etymology of the word Odin is from Wotan, which means to be angry. So evidently, Wotan was a really vengeful, angry god of the Norse. I don't know, but I agree with you. It could be. You see the Druids and the Aenir, who were the older priests of Europe, who worshipped in groves, specifically the oak.
I don't know. I can't add anything to it because all I've heard is secondhand and third hand, or I've looked up some stuff and seen, yes, the Christmas tree goes back to the idea of the Asherah, but I think those are not really, vetted academic opinions. I think it's more just like pop culture. I don't know what the origin of the Christmas tree is, to be quite frank. But
You said
I
the
think,
Asherah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, no problem.
You said the Asherah was a type of tree, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just trying to see if they worded that like that for a reason. With the I guess it being a goddess or whatever, but if it's just a tree, then I guess it's like black and white or why that's worded like that.
Oh, it's a tree that represents a goddess. I mean, it was a tree that basically served as a goddess.
Okay.
Or a pole sometimes, yeah.
So it actually is mentioning the goddess and not just the tree.
Yeah.
Where is the sirens coming from?
Somewhere.
I don't know. Not here.
Not here either.
Not by me. So must be Cleveland. What's the situation in Cleveland, by the way?
What's the situation?
Yeah, so many cities are burning down and
Not
rioting and whatnot.
not here in Cleveland. I'm actually in Columbus right now, and it's pretty cool out here.
Nice, good. Well, that's
Where
encouraging
you
to
think
hear.
of that, Bruce?
So maybe we should read a little bit quicker, make some more progress.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, we could do that, but I mean, also, I think it's if we just, are going through just to finish it off with, I don't think it's the right way either. I mean, I think we should stop and discuss these things because it's the only way we learn rather than trying to, fulfill some goal of getting through the parsha. But I guess we could pick up the speed if that's what everyone wants to do.
Yeah, a little bit, so we can finish.
On 22, right?
All right.
We're not going to finish.
Yeah, we're not going to finish, Bruce. I hate to break it to you. But yeah, we're in Deuteronomy 17:1 now.
Yeah. No, we're in 22, 16, 22. ولو تقيم لك מצבה أشير شاني أدونai Elohecha.
Hey,
Yeah, Saneh, he hates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Saneh. Excuse me.
So, and maybe we should describe, maybe we should explain very quickly what a matzeva is.
Those are standing stones.
Right. So why does God hate them? I mean, listen, Jacob made a standing stone with when he made the covenant with Lavan, and we see other examples of our ancestors making standing stones.
Joshua made one at Gerizim.
Right. There you go.
Since you're talking about the word matzeva, I should tell you that there's a word in Polish, matzevis, and every Pole knows the word matzevis. It's Yiddish, but it's from matzeva. In the Ashkenazi pronunciation of matzeva in the plural, it's matzevis. And every Pole knows the word matzevis, meaning Jewish gravestone.
Oh, no kidding. Seriously.
Wow.
Right.
Huh.
That's what I've been involved in the last few years.
Right.
The Poznan Matzevis Redemption Project.
Bruce, why don't you want to explain a little bit what that is? Because I know what it is because you told me.
Just briefly.
Yeah.
When the Germans came in, they destroyed not only Jews and synagogues, but they even destroyed Jewish cemeteries. And they very often destroyed the tombstones or used the tombstones for different building projects. Roadways, pavements, stairways, foundations, curbstones. Even in Poznan, they use them as flooring for an artificial lake that they built.
No kidding. Seriously. Wow.
And that's where my great-great-grandfather lived and died, in this city, Poznan. It's halfway between Warsaw and Berlin. And I'd like to find his gravestone. And in the process, in connection with the Polish Institute of National Remembrance, which is like the Polish Yad Vashem, and the History Department of Poznan University, and the Chief Rabbi's Office. And I'm leaving out a couple other places like the Genealogical Society of Poznan City. I've been working on a project to find these matzevis fragments, collect them, bring them to a work area, and start putting fragments together to reconstruct whole matzevis. And that's the project.
It's awesome.
Interesting.
And Bruce has been to Poland. How many times have you been to Poland, Bruce? Many.
13
Wow.
times.
Wow. Well, maybe you should be looking at the bottom of a lake to find your great.
Yeah, the thing of it is, it was done during the war, and
Right.
so there's a layer of silt over the
Mhm.
gravestones.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't really see the actual gravestones, and we don't know how many there are,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't know if they're fragments or if they're whole.
Right.
And there's more we don't know than what we do know.
Hey, ain't that life?
That's what Drew Drew posted this week. He says, what was it he put? What we know is like a drop in the ocean, and what we don't know is the ocean itself, or something like that.
So true.
I can't remember exactly how it was, but it was funny the way he put it. Okay, for those just joining, we're in Deuteronomy chapter 16. We just read the last verse of chapter 16, so now we're in chapter 17, verse 1. And I'm just going to translate the last verse that I read. And you shall not erect for yourselves a metzevah, which is a standing stone, which Adonai your God hates.
Right, and so I think we should explain very briefly why does he hate a standing stone?
I don't know.
Okay, well, I mean, these standing stones were generally what was erected by the idol worshippers, right? So you go to some top or some place and you put up a like a large stone that represents basically either a place where you'd sacrifice to your God, or it could represent the God itself. So it gets back to this idea of as we've said before, many gods, many places to worship, or many places of worship. One God, one place of worship. One of the main points that's made in the Torah is that there's only one single central place of worship. There should be no other place, and that seems to be kind of a protection of against polytheism. That the idea is if you have to go to a single place, you're only going to be worshiping one God. If you have a zillion and one places, right, as we read in last week's parsha, on top of every hill and under every shady tree, then you're going to have a million gods as well, because there's no centralization, right? So this whole idea of a matzevah is something that can be erected very easily anywhere. You could put it in your backyard. You could put it up in a hill, over yonder, the next hill over, or wherever the case may be, in a grove, as you said, and so it's clearly associated with idol worship, as is the Asherah, and that's why it's hated by Yehovah. So.
And we have to understand too that God told the Israelites that when they cross over the Jordan, they were to take 12 stones, and they were to set them up in I think it was Aval. I think it actually said that.
On Mount Ebal, that's right.
And they were to put a coat of whitewash over it, and they were to write the Torah, the words of the Torah on it. Now, when Joshua actually fulfilled that command, the stone that he did that was called the Mitzvah. And so that's interesting. So someone made a point to me also that it's not every Mitzvah that God hated. It was just certain ones. And perhaps it was because we know when we went into the land, we were to destroy the Mitzvot of the nations. And we were to remove the very mention of the various gods of those nations from the places where they worshipped. But to say that he's completely against a Mitzvah goes against what we read about, because he says to take those stones and set them up and write the Torah upon them. And
Right.
that's what it's called. When Joshua did it, it was called the Mitzvah.
Right. So this
So I
goes
find
back to the idea of of taking into account the context here, and the context here is clearly the type of matzeva that the idol worshippers would set up, which would basically be stones that were kind of monuments to their gods everywhere.
Which is why you have the parenthetical Meracha and Tipika here for the Asher Saneh.
What's that?
When you read the text, you have it says lo tapin lecha matzeva, and then you have Asher Saneh. You have the parenthetical Asher Saneh.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Alrighty.
Okay, so verse
Chapter
1
17.
of chapter 17. Yeah, go right ahead.
Ashur, we say Ashur Yehye Bo Tum Mit Bo Mum Ko Dabar Ra Kito Abat Yehwa Eloheka Hu.
Very good.
Pretty good, yeah. Not bad at all. Not bad at all. Pretty impressive. Okay, so translation, anyone?
That's where I'm still learning the game.
You shall not sacrifice to Adonai your God. Shor will say, which is a bull, or a say is like a sheep, which will have any kind of defect or anything bad. Kul davar or any bad thing. Because Adonai your God despises it, or it is
it's an abomination.
Despised. Yeah, it's an abomination. There you go.
Right.
Which
so there are very few things that are called abomination in the Torah. The famous one is homosexuality, but there are others as well, such as using incorrect measures and weights is also called a toeva. So, but the word is very limited in the Tanakh. Toeva is a very specific thing. It's kind of the kind of thing that I guess makes you look at it, and it makes you want makes you sick to your stomach, So I think the implication here is that if you bring a blemished animal on the sacrifice and put it on God's altar, that there's just something disgusting about it. It's not just that it's wrong; it's disgusting. It's sickening to look at. When you see someone using incorrect measures and weights, that's another one that's called toeva. Then it's there's something disgusting about it. There's something it just makes you sick to your stomach to see someone just like blindly cheating someone else. So
we got Deuteronomy 22:5, right? Too, Yaakov.
What's
that?
Deuteronomy 22:5.
22:5.
Yeah.
Look, what is it?
I just want to add something, Melech. You said that homosexuality is a toeva, abomination.
Right.
I'd like to specify that it's only man and man homosexuality that's an abomination.
I'll go more than I think. Really, what it's speaking about, and I've said this for many years, and I've been misunderstood for many years, but it's specifically anal sex between men is what it's speaking about when the prohibition on homosexuality, in my opinion.
That could be, but it's what's
not
clear
right.
is that it does not say woman.
Correct.
Amen.
Or sexuality
right.
is an abomination.
That's right. And in the case of men, it doesn't speak about it. The only sexual act it's really speaking about is anal sex, in my opinion. Anywho, so but I have a question. So what's wrong with bringing a blemished animal?
It could have.
Showing disrespect. If you love someone, you
There you
give
go.
them your best.
Yeah,
You give them the
Yeah,
most
exactly.
perfect thing that you can. And to give a blemished animal
right,
is like an insult.
right,
And an insult to another human being is an insult, but an insult to
Right.
God, to the
Right.
Creator, is abominable.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, it's not only sacrifices that are held to the standard for the Levitical priests. The priests weren't allowed to be priests
Right.
if they had blemishes.
Sure. Yeah.
And no one
right.
was allowed to enter into the kahal who had
right.
a lame foot or was a eunuch, which is what they usually translate as crushed in the stones. Or any kind of blemish like that. Now that doesn't mean that they were kicked out of, the people of Israel. It's just they weren't allowed into certain offices or positions. And this is the same thing with sacrifices. We're going to read, I think, here in a few verses, if we get that far, when it talks about the Bikurim. It says if you normally you give your Bikor to the Levite, you give it over to the Levite on the 8th day. It's supposed to stay with its mother for 7 days. On the 8th day, you got to give it up. Now, it says
You're talking. Just to clarify, what you're talking about is you're talking about the firstborn animals.
Yeah, the animal. So it says if, and we're going to read that later, if the Bikor has a problem with it, then you're not to take that Bikor to the, that's right. You can eat it. It says anybody can eat it.
Right.
You don't have to be clean to eat it. You can eat it right there, and you don't have to bring it to wherever. But on the 8th day, whenever you have that, you have to give that over to the Levite, because that will be taken during those pilgrimage festivals to be sacrificed.
But getting back to the original question, and I think Bruce, in my opinion, Bruce answered right on the money, is that you always have to give to Yahweh. You're giving him your best, right? We give him our first fruits, right? When the barley is ripe, we take the first fruits of the barley harvest, and we give it to Yahweh. He gets the first. He gets the best. He gets the top. He doesn't get the leftovers and the diseased and the lame. And it's exactly right. It's beyond disrespect, right? It's a disgrace to do such a thing, to keep the best for yourself and to give the worst away to God, right? God gets the best, and not because.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
When we're told. Go ahead, Bruce.
I was saying that's the difference between being frugal and being cheap. You could be frugal with yourself.
Right.
Don't be cheap with someone else.
Well, my question is, when we're told to count the tithes, it says you're supposed to take whichever one that passes under the rod as the 10th and set it aside. And it says you're not supposed to look and see if it's okay or if there's a problem with it. And you're not supposed to exchange it.
But that's not going directly. I mean, it is holy, but it's not going directly to God. But yeah.
Well, the tithe goes to the Levites, but it's not necessarily going to the altar.
Right. I would like to point out for a second, Malachi, chapter 1, verse 8, because it relates to this. And you can go back, actually, 1 or 2 verses. Oh, Bruce said why Bruce is upset. We're going to It's very relevant, though. Okay, so I'll just read it very quickly. And maybe I'll just read it just in the English. No, I'll read it very quickly. So verse 8 says, "V'chi tagishun iver lizboach," and when you bring a blind animal to sacrifice to me, right? It's God speaking. "En ra," is this not evil? "V'chi tagishu piseach v'chole en ra," and when you bring a lame or a sick animal, is this not evil? הקריבהו נא לפתחך. Now, why don't you go bring that to your overlord, okay, your governor. Hayitzcha or hayisa panecha, amar Yehovah Tzevaot. If go bring it to your overlord, to your governor, will he want it? Will he literally lift up your face? Will he receive it kindly? Will he receive you kindly? Says Yehovah Tzevaot, right? So again, that goes back to the idea of exactly what Bruce said, that if he's saying to the Israelites, Yoah is saying to the Israelites, you wouldn't bring that crap to your overlord, you wouldn't bring it to your governor, or to the mayor, or to to the king, but yet you're going to bring it to me. Is that not evil that you feel you could bring blind and lame and sick animals to me, but you would never even think of doing so to your governor? So it relates right back to this verse right here. Okay, anybody want to say anything else before we move on?
Okay, verse 2.
Verse 2.
Who wants to read?
I'll take it. Ki yemaze brigreka be'achar sha'areka asher Adonai Eloheka loten lak ish o isha asher ya'ase et hara be'eni Adonai Eloheka la'abor berito.
Super.
Someone want to translate?
I'll read a translation. If there will be found among you within one of your cities, which Yahweh, your God, is giving you, a man or woman who does evil in the eyes of Yahweh, your God, to transgress his covenant.
Right. And if I could just point out there for 1 second, the word for in Hebrew is sha'arecha. That's the same word we saw before, literally gates. And when Bruce read the translation, it was translated as cities. So again, that's sha'arim is a kind of euphemism for cities.
Sha'ari.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
All right, verse 3.
Mm-hmm. Verse 3.
I'll take it again. Fuck it.
Yeah.
Waya abo Elohim acharim Wayishtarchu lahem le lashemesh or layarecha or lekal zeba hashemaim asher lo zigwiti.
Nice.
Pretty good.
Translation, Bruce?
I'll translate. And if he goes and worships other gods and bows down to them, and to the sun or to the moon or to any of the constellations of the sky, which I have not commanded.
Mm-hmm. So okay, I guess everything there is straightforward.
Right. Just Shaya, I just wanted to mention that in that word yareach, the last letter chet, it's an exception to the rule of reading consonant vowel. When a chet comes at the end of a word, you read the vowel and then the consonant. It's yareach.
Okay. Okay, I got you.
Yep. Bruce, I'm just curious, what translation are you reading there?
I translated that. I didn't read it, but
okay.
If you want me to read the translation that I have.
No, I was just curious because I guess it was your own translation. You translated the Tzava Shemayim as constellation, so I just thought that was an interesting translation. It's usually translated as the host of heaven. Yeah.
Okay.
I interpret it as meaning all basically the stars, not necessarily the constellations. That's why I was curious where that translation of constellations came from.
That's a Bruce translation. I have
Okay,
a
got
Chabad,
it.
I have a
The,
Chabad translation in front of me, and it says, "Any of the host of the heavens."
right,
Yeah.
right. Uh-huh. Got it. So you were doing the you were using the BBV, the Bruce Brill version.
Right.
Okay.
Interesting. The word Siva in ancient Egyptian means a star.
Uh-huh.
Literally, it would be all the army, singular,
Yeah,
singular, and all the army of the heavens.
Right. Right. Yeah, the army, the host
Exact thing.
of heavens.
The
Mhm.
Egyptian hieroglyph for Siva is actually a star, which is interesting.
Mhm. Okay, which may or may not be relevant. Who knows? Might just be coincidence. Okay. Lotziviti. Okay, verse 4. Shaya. Good.
Or, I got you.
You gotta get a
Who
practice today.
Sorry. Yeah.
It's cool. I love it. With who God leka.
Yeah, man, it's great. It doesn't matter if you make a mistake here and there. It's don't worry about it. It's not a big deal.
Okay. With who God leka. With shemata. With darashta. Ete with hine. Emit. Nakon. Hadabar. Neesta. Hato eba. Hazot. Israel.
Wow, really good.
Yep. Here we have again the word toeva, by the way, abomination. Right. So idol worship is an abomination, as we saw earlier with the matzeva. I'm sorry, with the blemishes, with the blemished animals. Okay. Someone want to translate?
Yeah. So, if you are informed and you have heard, then you shall search well.
Mm-hmm.
And if this thing is correct and true, then that the to'eva is done. This to'eva is done in Israel. The to'eva, which they translate as an abomination, but it just means something that's also hated. It's kind of like the synonym for saneh. We're told lo tita'av edomim. We're told not to hate
Right.
or the Egyptian, and it uses
Yep.
the same verb. So it says, so if you've been informed and you've heard, then you'll search it out really well. And if this thing is correct and is true, that this hateful thing, this abomination, was done in Israel.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to point out one or two things here, or really just one thing. The word with hugad, the first word there, is an interesting kind of construction, something we don't see very, very often. So maybe this is directed more for, I guess, those learning Hebrew or beginners in Hebrew.
Yep.
So, yep. Shai, you wanted to say something?
No, I was just listening because I've been working on my reading, stuff like that. But I wanted to get more into better like parsing out and break it down the scripture. So I was just gonna listen to what you were just about to say.
Okay, so I'll try to break it down as clearly as possible. So the underlying verb there would be lahagid. Lahagid means to tell, okay, and that would be the active form. So if I want to say I tell you, or I say to you, I'd say ani magid lacha, I tell you, okay, that's the active form. Then you have the kind of the reverse of that, which is what's called the passive form, okay. So the passive form would mean I am told by you, okay? I am told by you. Here what we have is the passive form in the past. So here it literally says, or that would be, the sentence I've been using as an example, in the passive form in the past would be, I was told by you, right? So far so good. So I tell you, ani magid lacha, I am told by you, And then in the passive form, I was told, okay? But here, this is the third person, passive form in the past. So literally what it's saying here, to take away the first letter, which is V, and you have hugad, and it says he was told, okay? Or it was told in this case, actually, okay?
Okay.
So hugad means it was told or he was told, okay? So, and then if you add that first letter, the vav, that's called the vav hipuch. I think in English they call it the conversive vav. And what that does is, in biblical Hebrew, that switches the past into the future. But it doesn't. It's not a straight out switch into the future. It kind of implies should it happen, or might it happen, or would it happen. And so what it's really saying here is it's taking this hugad, which means it was told, and putting the vav before it and saying it will be told, okay, or should it be told. And that's exactly. It's a very complicated construct here, but it's very interesting because you don't see that construct too often. So where it says v'hugad lecha, literally it means should it be told to you, or shall it be, or if it were to be told to you. And then it goes on to say, and you listen to it, and you hear it, and you search out well, etc., etc. So to break that down again, lahagid is I tell, and then you have the passive form in the present, which would be I am told. In the past, it would be I was told, which would be ugad, ani ugad. But this is the third person, so it's hugad, which means he was told or it was told. And then you have the vav, which switches it back to the future. So should it be told? Does it kind of make sense? It's a bit complicated, I know, but I just thought I'd point it out. You gotta, if you really want to parse it out, you've got to consult this they call it the binyanim, the different verb forms, different types of there are 7 of them, different types of verb structures for Hebrew.
Verb stems.
What's that?
You were talking about the verb stems?
Yeah, the verb charts, basically. The Hebrew verb charts. And then maybe it'll make a bit more sense. But it's an interesting construct because you don't see it very often. Anyway, anybody want to add anything? Yaakov, you're the grammar guy. You want to add anything?
Not really a sentence. The next sentence is a continuation of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right.
This is the actual consequences that we're going to get. It says, "وَهُسَيْسَا et ha'ish hahu, o et ha'isha hahi, asher asu et hadavar hara hazeh il she'arecha et ha'ish o et ha'isha וסקלתם באבנים ומיתו." Then you shall bring out that man or that woman which has done this wrong thing, this evil thing, to your gate, the man or the woman, and you shall stone them with stones that they die.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Why be'avanim?
I don't know any other way to stone them without it.
I think that's exactly Bruce's question.
It seems redundant or superfluous.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think. Mm-hmm.
But we learn that there's nothing superfluous or redundant in the Torah. So why be'avanim? What's the point here?
If I could take that one, and then if anyone else wants to chime in. First of all, this idea that there's nothing redundant or superfluous in the Torah, I think, is incorrect. It's a rabbinical idea, really a medieval rabbinical idea which is in my opinion completely correct. The Torah will often use redundancy, and it will use lots of redundancy, and it will use what I guess you could call superfluousness, but you would call it, I guess, clarification or addition of context. To create emphasis, or to create a certain mood, or to paint a certain picture, or to paint a certain scene. So I think that's what's going on here. First of all, sakaltam doesn't necessarily apply. I'm going to look it up right now, but as far as I know, it doesn't necessarily apply that it has to be with stones.
Sakala, I think, means to pelt somebody. You could pelt them with,
Right.
or strike them.
Right.
You can strike them with wood to sticks, or you can beat them with sticks till they die, or you can beat them with or stone them with rocks.
Right.
But usually you say Sakala means to stone.
Yeah. Right. According to the BDB, it does say stone, put to death by stoning. But I think the implication is that it's like you said, it means pelt in its most underlying meaning, right? It means pelt. But even if so, even if it does imply already within itself stoning, then when you add ba'avanim, it would serve to make the picture more graphic, right? And that's exactly what the Torah wants to do.
I accept that.
Right.
Good explanation.
Yeah.
The trouble is, Melech, I've been working on editing my book, and the whole word economy thing, when I see something that looks superfluous or redundant, I raise my antennas.
Yeah.
You're right.
Forget word economy. Word economy, I think, is a mistake. Sometimes more words say less, and sometimes less words say more. So it could go both ways. But at any rate, it
does paint a clearer picture.
Yeah, and that's what the Torah wants to do. A lot of times, the idea of a stoning is that people are supposed. It's not just that the person gets punished. It's that it's supposed to be a public event. People see it, and they get scared, and they say, "Damn, I was gonna go worship some idols, but now maybe I better, do something. Maybe I better sit down and play some checkers with a friend instead."
Think twice about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna think twice about it. So, and I think that's what it does.
That's the point. We're about to read that point here. Just if we ever get to that point, we'll read. We'll read about it.
Yeah. I just want to see if I want to say any other thing here. Isha, I did want to say one other thing. Talking about word economy, this is one of the few places where it says very specifically ha'ish or ha'isha, right? Usually it just speaks about the male.
Right. I noticed that.
Right. Usually it just speaks about the male, and it's implied that also applies to females, right? Or maybe it's not implied, but it needs to be kind of figured out, right? Here it's very specifically stating the man or the woman, and from what I've noticed is that when a commandment states explicitly a man or a woman, it really wants to point out very clearly that this is a very, very serious command that applies to everybody, and it kind of emphasizes the seriousness of the command, which of course we know idol worship is pretty serious.
Good point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so onwards. P. Shia, you want to take it?
Yeah, verse 6, right? Al-Pi Shenaim, Edim O Shelosha, Edim Umat, Hamit Lo, Yumat Al-Pi Ad Echad.
So, Al-Pi is usually translated as at the mouth, but it could also mean on the authority of. And we'll see the same type of phrase used later in this first aliyah, talking about the judges. When you take the cases before the judges at their mouth, or at the mouth of their instruction, and it's basically saying according to the authority of their instruction. And you see it used al-pi Torah a lot, according to the authority of the instruction of whatever. And so it's saying at the mouth, or according to the authority of two witnesses,
or more,
or three witnesses, Yumat Hamid, he shall certainly be put to death. This, anytime you see the imperfect with the infinitive,
right?
It could be imperfect or perfect, doesn't matter. But this is the repetition we spoke about at the beginning with the setic.
Right.
Here's the same type of phenomenon. You have a repetitive phrase, Yumat, and this is in the passive, and then you have Hamid in the infinitive. So
Right.
he shall certainly be put to death.
Right.
Lo
And-
yumath,
Right. Go ahead,
he shall
Jacob.
not be put to death at the authority of a single witness.
Right. Yeah, there's got to be some kind of redundancy here. There's got to be a surety that it's not a single witness isn't reliable, right? You've got to kind of like triangulate it. More than one has got to see it. By the way, I'd also like to point out that this verse has been, I guess you could say you can call it maybe distorted or exaggerated or misused, whereby in a lot of times it's considered that any case has to be witnessed by two witnesses, and that's not the case. It's really it's specifically speaking here about idol worship. I think in another place it speaks specifically about murder. So it's only the very serious cases where you have to have the two witnesses, not every single case.
This is when you have capital punishment where it leads to death.
Right.
Because that's
Exactly.
specifically saying he can't be put to death.
Right.
So whatever the case may be, the person has to be liable to death.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And verse 7. So go ahead, Shia.
Verse 7 says, let me get there. Verse 7. Yad ha'edim teyebo barishona lahamito veyad kal ha'am be'acharona ubi arta ha'ara mikre beka.
Right.
And the hand of the witnesses shall be first against him to put him to death, and then the hand of all the people afterwards. And so shall you put away the evil from amongst you.
I don't even like the word "put away." It says they're literally burned. You shall cauterize. I think would be the right.
Well,
Yeah,
this is one of those words that we talked about before when we talk about homonyms.
Right.
We have verbs that are spelled the same. Sometimes they're conjugated the same, but they're two different verbs have two different meanings. We know
that this is okay.
no, this is something different. This means to put away. In fact, you use the same verb when you talk about your bikurim that you put in the basket and you take to the Kohen Gadol. You make your confession that I haven't put away anything. So you're not saying I haven't burned it away. You're saying I haven't put it away. And you say I haven't put it away from my house. You use the same verb. I haven't the RT, whatever, from my house, from the sacred things that we're supposed
Yes,
to come
but
to.
one could explain that that's just figurative by extension, and that really the underlying verb is just a singular verb, which is bi'er. And again, if I look at the BDB, which I'm looking at right now, it seems to back that up. I'm not saying you're wrong, guys. I'm just saying maybe there's more than one.
The BDB is severely outdated, and they don't list the homonyms.
I would
Group everything together.
also I would also add context because in the previous verses it doesn't necessarily mention setting up places to burn, but we do see the item of removing such evil from the from your gates, or something to that effect. And forgive me if I'm being a bit pretentious at this point, but it just seems to me that to suddenly burn, without previous mention, knowing how the Torah loves to reiterate itself, without saying a earlier mentioning of something being burned or set up to be burned, those being the people that are the transgressors, I should say. I just think that it just pops up out of nowhere, and you should burn them. I think that contextually we can go along with the removal of the evil.
If I can use what you said as a springboard, because that's almost exactly what I was about to say. Livor means to kindle or ignite. And I would translate this word to extinguish, because sometimes in Hebrew you find the same word having two antipodal meanings. And I think this is one of them. So I would translate this word to extinguish the evil from your midst.
But what Yaakov is saying is actually, I agree with you, Bruce. I take your side on this. I think that it does mean, livaer in this case means to burn or extinguish, you can call it. But what Yaakov is saying is something else. He's saying this is a completely different verb from livor, that it's another verb that just happens to be spelled exactly the same, but it means something completely different. I'm going to go ahead and disagree with that, but I guess that's.
I'm gonna check out the Hebrew Aramaic lexicon of the Old Testament real quick. I'll just give me 1 second.
That's one of the best ones. It's called the Halot. That's done. That was the latest, and it's really good. They actually set aside the homonyms, and that has been a lot of discussion in the last 20, 30 years academically, is about homonyms, because apparently before the 21st century, there was no such thing as homonyms in Hebrew, which isn't the case.
Give me a second here. I'm just about there. I got a PDF version, so I got to do quite a bit of flipping.
That's my boy Dwight.
Yes, sir. How you doing, my boy?
How you doing?
I'm doing well. Let's see.
Rona.
All right. And we're looking for Rival, right?
Ba'ar, yeah.
Oh,
this is going to be
Ba'ar.
the PL, Ba'ar.
All right. Ba'ar. Okay, I got you. I did a little metathesis there for some reason. All right, give me 1 moment here. All right, here we are. I'm almost
Did
there.
Melech leave?
So
It's a
battery probably
possibility.
died again.
Well, the thing about the BDB is that, like, I agree with you in that it's outdated.
It's
because
severely outdated.
it was compiled before the discovery of Rosh Hashanah, and
Right.
there's a lot that we have figured out or found out with that discovery of Rosh Hashanah, and it kind of, I don't want to say it changed the scope of Hebrew lexicology, but it definitely added some things that were not available at that point in time.
Well, it's added a lot of different verb forms even to the Hebrew.
Right.
Like we have now a hotpa'al, which is a passive form of the hitpa'el, and we actually have evidence in the Torah. But the discussion before the discovery of Rosh Hashanah was that the hotpa'el could have been a mistaken a form, but now we know it's not a mistaken form. It's actually a passive form of the reflexive hitpa'el.
All right,
but
so
we have that in the Torah.
I did find the entry. It's entry number 1344, and it has definitions of to graze, to devastate, to sweep away, or to remove. And interestingly enough, we see this is being attributed to Deuteronomy 17:17. Deuteronomy 17:7-12, under the definition of remove.
Yeah.
So I am in agreement with you, Yaakov, in that it's not necessarily to burn, but if we take it in the sense of extinguishing, as in to remove it, to completely remove, or to, for lack of a better word, disintegrate, I think that can be that's extinguishes a little closer to what we're looking for than just to burn.
Yeah, well, the thing is that there's no way you can get burning in any sense in the meaning of the root when you use it in chapter 26. I'll read it to you. There's no way to it.
26 and 13, right?
Yeah, whenever you get to the point where you're talking about your first fruits. you taking them out, you're setting them aside. There's no way. How do you apply any meaning of the word to burn to that? It just doesn't work.
Hold on 1 second. My dog's going crazy. One of them is at least. But yeah, I hear you though.
But anyway, that's been a subject of debate in the academic world for the last more than 30 years. Is about homonyms in Hebrew, and you find that a lot. You've got words that they're spelled the same, they are seemingly pronounced and conjugated the same, but there's certain conjugations that you get into where you actually see the difference. And that's what, when you get into the different roots that are homonyms, in the different conjugations, they'll actually be conjugated differently. And so that's how you know indeed that these are homonyms, but that's not always the case. Hang on, I think that's probably.
All right, I'm gonna mute myself real quick, but I'm still here.
Nope, that's arrows. I don't know what happened to Melech. Okay, anyway, so verse 7 was the hand of yeah, we already read that. So now we get to verse 8. Ki yipale mimcha davar limishpat bein dam ladam bein din ladin uvein nega lanega divrei rivov b'she'arecha وقمت وعليت إل המקום أشر יבחר אדוני אלוהיך בו. Here's Melech again. Melech, your battery died?
Hey,
My battery died.
I knew it.
I get so into the Torah studies that I get these warnings: 20%, 10%, and it's like I ignore them, and then all of a sudden,
Yeah,
the 0%.
Y'all go mention your battery might have died.
Yep. I could ignore the 20% and I could ignore the 10%, but the 0% I can't ignore.
You can't ignore that, yeah.
No, that one I
comes
can't
soon. Look, and it literally before you know it, you're
there it is. Happens
before
so
you know
quick.
it. Yeah,
Yep.
no, I understand, man. I understand.
We're on verse
Yep.
8, Melech.
All right, verse 8. Oh, okay. Here we go.
So I got somebody writing me. Give me just a second. I'm going to send him the link.
All right.
well, 8, right?
Yeah, I'll read in the meantime, I guess. Okay. Or does someone else want to read?
Yaakov read it, but feel free.
Oh, okay. No. If you already read it, then that's fine. And did we translate it already?
No,
Not yet.
that's we haven't got there yet.
Okay, so I'll render a translation then. So keep yipale mincha davar lemishpat. So if it is literally too wondrous for you, too great above your head, too difficult for you, the mincha davar lemishpat, this issue for judging, ben dam ledam, literally between blood to blood, ben din ledin. I don't know who's got the TV on in the back.
No, that's me. Give me a second. I'll mute. Somebody's doing some surveying on our roof.
Oh,
here.
okay. All right. Oh, no problem. I just wasn't sure. You could put it, if you go all the way to the left, then you'll still be in the Zoom, but it will mute it'll temporarily mute your speaker, and so then you won't get the background noise. Anyway, okay. Ben dam ledam, literally between blood to blood. Ben din ledin, between judgment to judgment. Ben nega lenega, which literally means blemish to blemish. So these are different examples of the different types of disputes that people can have in their daily lives. Divrei rivot bisha'arecha, the various matters of a dispute literally in your gates, but as we saw, gates mean cities. Wakamta wa'lita el hamakom asher yivhar Yehovah Elohecha bo. then you shall arise and you shall go up. And notice that when it speaks about going to the land, it's always up. When it speaks about going to Jerusalem or the place, it's always up. So literally, you shall arise and go up to, and in modern Hebrew, of course, we call, most people I think would know that if you move to Israel, it's called making aliyah. You arise, you go up. Kamta alita elamakom asher yivhar Yehovah Elohecha bo. You shall arise and go up to the place which Yehovah, your God, has chosen. Okay. Yep. So the idea here, I think, is a kind of simple. There's a hierarchical court system. We've got the lower courts in the gates. Literally, it says here in verse 8, B'sha'arecha. As we've seen before in previous verses, this means that speaking about in the cities, in the local cities. And if ki yipale mimcha, literally, if it is too wondrous for you, that's literally what it says. Pele is a wonder. Certainly is. And so if it is too wondrous for you, too difficult for you is the way it's usually translated, then the local judge can't solve it. Then basically you take it to the Supreme Court, which sits in the place that God has chosen. Eventually that would be Jerusalem, right? And then you have the head judge there, which we'll talk about in the next verse. Okay, so verse 9. Somebody want to read, or should I do it? Or any comments, first of all, on verse 8?
No.
I'm
Okay,
prepared to read whenever you need me to. I got
Bruce, go for it. Go for it.
Real quick, on that 8, I just think, just real quick, that's kind of cool that there's a hierarchical system. You know what I'm saying? You're not relying on just one individual. If it's too difficult for them, they're not able to just either make a uninformed decision or an arbitrary decision. And I just think that's cool that, and if the next person can't solve it, then go up the ladder, take it up the chain of command.
Right.
That's just a testament to the organization that the Torah provides for the common man. You know what I'm saying? Because I can't go to the Supreme Court. I ain't got the money for it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
If the case necessitated, I'd be able to, go to the city judge, the county judge, the state judge, or whomever, and that's just cool to me. That's all I want to say on that matter.
Yep, and I think we should point out, I think we'd be, not doing our duty if we didn't point out that this system was set up at the advice of Jethro, right? And that's, I think, in Exodus, find it 18? Yeah, Jethro visits. Right, so if we go back to Exodus 18, Jethro visits his son-in-law, and you all know the story. He sees Moses sitting there from the morning till the night, and he says, if you continue to do this, you're going to basically you're gonna break, and you're also gonna destroy the nation that you're trying to judge, because this burden is too great for you. And then he advises him to choose men of wise men who are fearful of God, and to establish them as lower judges. And then only if the case is too difficult, then the case would be turned over to Moses, where he would adjudicate the difficult cases. So that was set up in Exodus 18, and here it's enshrined in the law of the Torah by Moses himself, to whom the advice was given here in Deuteronomy 17. I think it's also important to point out that I guess you could use the analogy of it in the United States. So you have the local courts. Okay, the judges who sit on the local courts, they got good grades in law school. They're good judges. They have experience, in theory, at any rate, right? And but they're not the top judges in the land. The idea of,
in theory, that's funny.
Right, I say in theory, right? So, yeah, I could tell you about a couple of traffic tickets where I might disagree with that. But at any rate, the idea of the Supreme Court. The idea of the Supreme Court is you're supposed to look through all of these judges and pick the top ones, the top legal scholars, the top minds in the country, and then they get promoted to this top court. So it's in theory, again, the Supreme Court is supposed to be the top minds, the top legal minds in the country, and they're supposed to be dealing, again, with only the most difficult cases, right? Because, again, if you use the United States as an analogy, and I'm quite sure that the United States, when it set up the system, that the founding fathers were probably thinking of this first. In fact, this idea, in fact, if you look through their writings, it might even say that. I don't know. But at any rate, the same thing. The easy cases go to the lower courts, and then the more difficult cases work their way up through the hierarchy. You have the appellate courts, and then ultimately you have the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court only hears a tiny fraction of the cases that are ever brought before the lower courts, and they're supposed to be the top minds that can deal with these hard cases. So it's the same thing, in theory.
You know, I want to make a point too, and I didn't actually think about this until someone asked me the question. And that's why I really appreciate questions, is because sometimes I don't know what it is I should ask until someone asks me.
Totally.
And but we see that it talks about the Levites. Now, the central court, wherever the place is going to be, they're made up of Levites. We see that in the time of Jehoshaphat, and also David, because David's the one who set it up. He set up the division of the priests, of the Levites.
Right.
And it says he took the Kehathites, which is, Kehath was the family from Levi. You had Kehath, you had Gershom, and Merari. Kehath had Amram had Moses, and Aaron, and so forth. So David took the Kehathites to be the judges and officers amongst Israel. And later that was reestablished in the time of Jehoshaphat. And so it goes back to the Torah. Okay, so next verse.
אל הכהנים הלוויים ואל השופט אשר יהיה בימים ההם ודרשת והגידו לך את דבר המשפט. And you shall come to the, I'm reading the Chabad translation, Levitical.
Oh, you're not reading the BBV?
I could if you want me to. I'll translate it.
As you wish.
And you will come to the Kohanim, the Leviim, and to the judge, which will be in those days, and petition, and he will, and they will, now it's a they will tell you the word of the sentence.
Yep.
I have a really cool point to make here.
Yeah.
When it says the Hashofet Asher Yihye Bayamim Hahem.
I know already what you say.
Judge
I love it.
who shall be in those days.
Right.
This explains to us that we can't really rely upon jurisprudence of a dead judge. You have to actually take the cases that happen to the person who would be adjudicating any of the cases in those days.
Right.
Which helps keep the Torah from being stagnant. It helps you have a fluid Torah so that as the days come and things change, then we can have jurisprudence.
No, I can think of a litany of so said Rabbi XYZ on the authority of XYZ on the authority of ABC.
Right.
That pretty much qualifies that off the bat.
Yeah.
Right. That's right. Yep. That's exactly
Actually,
right.
I heard a kind of apropos lecture by Dennis Prager about in those days, because
Mhm.
perception changes from generation to generation, and certainly from century to century. And
Mhm.
so you can't judge people in the past for the way we think today. For instance, the whole thing with the
True.
Black Lives Matter and taking down statues of Jefferson and Washington, that they were slave owners in that day. It was something that was acceptable. Today, it's totally unacceptable. So you have to judge them by the criteria of Bayamim Hahem.
Personally, I don't see the need to, I understand what they're getting at, but my thing is this: you can knock down as many statues as you want until you get some jurisprudence in your corner. It's not going to change much of anything. It's just imagery and symbolism, if you will. Go to the courts and get some jurisprudence, enforced, or get some legislation put into action. You know what I'm saying? Knocking down the statue is not going to keep the next, victim of, I should say, how do I put this? Arbitrary law enforcement. It's not going to save their life knocking down the Jefferson statue. You know what I'm saying? That's not going to happen. Get some legislation involved,
Yes.
Actually, I would like to point out a slightly different point here, which is that, and this is not my own idea. I wish it were, but it's not. But on my website, I have an article that many, many years ago, a very brilliant guy wrote, and I never met the guy, and he actually wanted to keep his name anonymous, so I don't even know what his name is. Oh, someone else told me what his name was. But he basically pointed out that this verse, where you have to go to the judge in your day, means, as Yaakov was saying, so you can't rely on precedent. This rabbi said, or as I guess it was Dwight who said it, this rabbi, so Rabbi X quotes Rabbi Y, quotes Rabbi Z, and therefore, wow, that's it, now it's law. That you actually, since you can't do that, and you can't rely on previous precedents, that you actually have only one thing to go back to, and that's the written Torah. And that's the only thing we can rely on that's the main point of it, right? The only thing we can rely on is that this phrase, Asher yeh bi'amim hahem, the judgment will be in those days, is the written Torah.
I would agree.
Back to the original text. Yeah,
I'm inclined to agree, especially upon the stipulation that you're not to change a single thing about it. You're not to add to it or take it away or take away from it. So the judge in those days would have to rely on the written Torah in order to make his judgment.
Right. Now, if you look at again, I never want to turn these sessions into rabbi bashing, but I think it's important to contrast.
There's nothing wrong with
maybe a little bit of rabbi bashing. Okay, a little bit.
Just a little bit.
All right, maybe a lot. Let's trash him. All right, let's go for it. All right, come on, take out the knives. All right, but seriously, what it does is I forgot my point. Okay, hold on a second. I guess what I was going to say is that in the case of the rabbis, it kind of forces it into being stagnant, as Yaakov was pointing out, right? That the Torah cannot somehow you can never. Oh, I know exactly the point I was going to say. I was going to say that the rabbis have you could see in their own writings, in the way they live today, or even in the Middle Ages, they don't go back to the Torah. They don't even know the Torah anymore. They only know the Torah through their jurisprudence, through the Talmud, through the later writings, the Halacha, and all this kind of stuff. And if you walk up to a typical Orthodox Jew, very religious Orthodox Jew today, and start quoting the Tanakh or the Torah, they may or may not know it, or they may know it in its distorted form from what they're getting for the Gemara. So this quoting one rabbi who quotes another, who quotes another, who quotes another, is very much in contrast to being forced to in each generation go back to the original, go back to the written law, and it keeps you in contact, and it keeps you connected to the original law of Moses. And that's something I
just want to clarify one thing, Melech.
Yeah.
I think the rabbis do know Torah. They do know Torah very well. What they don't know is Nach. can
Right.
take
Okay. Fair
you can
enough.
take almost any Protestant housewife in America. She'll know Nach better than any Orthodox rabbi.
Right.
Outside of the Haftarah. Yeah.
Well, when I say no Torah, yes, they can quote maybe chapter and verse here and there because every week they're sitting down and they're learning. They're learning Mikra and then Rashi twice, or Mikra with Rashi and then the Targum twice, or whatever the halacha is.
Maybe they're learning a
in the Shulchan Aruch.
distorted Torah.
That's my point.
Yeah.
That's my point. It's not that they can't quote chapter and verse. It's that they will literally interpret the verses wrong because they're so disconnected from the or they're seeing everything through the filter of this rabbi quotes that third rabbi, et cetera, et cetera. So they've lost touch with the original text. Not that they don't know it; they can quote it, but they don't understand it because they don't go directly to it. They go through many filters.
And I found the same thing in Islam. Upon Ibn so and so, upon the authority of Ibn so and so, said that he saw, the hadith. They do the same exact thing. And don't get me wrong, I'm not just like fluent or well versed in Al Quran, but at the same token, I have dictionaries and grammar, so I can go back and see what's being said. And if I ask an imam about a particular verse in the surah, and it'll be the same thing. Well, Ibn so and so, upon the authority of Ibn so and so, said that blah 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 blah, and I'm like, well, the Quran is kind of clear when it said X Y Z. Where is this coming from? And then next thing I know, I'm kicked out of the masjid.
I think everyone. I can speak for myself, but I think everyone in this group and in this learning session has been kicked out of more Facebook groups than they can possibly count on their various limbs.
Imam basher.
Hey, I'm like this, man. The Torah is the authority here, and if the Quran is supposed to be validating the Torah, then it's not supposed to be saying anything against it. I had an issue with someone. They were telling me that the separation of the wives upon her menstrual period was optional because Ibn so and so said that Ibn so and so heard that Ibn so and so was told by the Prophet Muhammad that he fondled his wife while she was menstruating. I'm like, yeah, but the Torah says, and they were like,
don't do it. The Quran says the same thing.
The Quran says the same, and I'm sitting there like, how did we get so far? But I get it now because we're not relying on what's written or what's dictated or recited. If we want to use specificities, we're not relying on what's written or what's recited. We're relying on hearsay. Like I could easily just walk up to somebody, hey, Ibn Uthman, on the authority of Ibn Omar, on the authority of Ibn Muhammad or whoever said that. They said that I can just go to your wife and kick her in the jaw, it's out of hand. It is completely out of hand.
So I would like to make a point to you. When we talk about the judge who has to be adjudicating in the days that the case comes up, all right, it's these authorities that we have to listen to, which we're about to read. But I want to make a point about why it's so clear that we can't go by a dead judge. Whenever you have a case of a man who kills someone accidentally and he flees to one of the cities of refuge, okay, it says the Goel Hadam, which is the redeemer of blood, has the right to kill this guy if he catches him before he gets to one of these cities, which was why it's so important for us to have so many cities throughout Israel that the person can get there without being killed.
Yeah, they were in every region.
All right. Now, he's to be brought before the judge, okay? And if he is not guilty of the crime, if it's been seen that he's not guilty of the crime, he has to remain in that city of refuge in his tribal area that he fled to until the death of the high priest, okay? Once that high priest is dead, he's allowed to go home. And the case, no matter what happens, cannot be re-adjudicated. that means no new evidence can be brought forth to incriminate the guy.
You know
Is there,
what?
is there a reason?
In
I got a
Shemot,
question.
I'm
My
sorry,
bad.
Shai, real quick. In Shemot, we see that with Moshe Rabbeinu. You know, we see that when he was not the text does not right say, you know, that he was accused of killing the Egyptian man that was basically abusing the Hebrew servant. He fled to Midian, and he stayed there until that Pharaoh died. And when he came back, nobody
That's a
brought
good
that
point.
accusation back against him.
That is a good point.
Is it?
I like that.
Is there a reason for that? That they have to wait till the high priest is dead to
Yeah.
go back to the city.
Yeah,
Is that
because
like
the case can't be
high
retried.
priest?
It was already tried during the days of the Cohen. Now, if any evidence is to be brought forth, it has to be brought forth within the lifetime of that Cohen who adjudicated the case. Okay, but once he's dead, it can't be rehashed.
It's
He's
over with
allowed
the
to go
case.
home, and no one's allowed to kill him.
Yeah, that
Oh,
priest
just
could die.
to play devil's advocate, why couldn't the new Kohen Gadol adjudicate the case?
Because it was the priest who was standing in those days that the crime happened. This is what we're reading about now.
Okay.
In those days.
And in order to persecute that individual for that particular crime, we would be doing the exact thing that we're ribbing about the rabbis about,
Sure.
upon the authority of Kohen, I don't know, Shia,
Right.
you
Yeah,
know
that's
what
a
I'm
good
saying?
point. Yeah. That's a
This
good point.
guy, he did X and he should have Y committed unto him. Well, we can't really do that because this Kohen was not there in those days,
Right.
so he doesn't have
It's
the
a very good
authority.
point. I'm gonna really think about it because I've never understood personally. To be quite honest, I've never understood why is the unintentional murderer allowed to go free when the Kohen Gadol dies. I've never understood that. I think this is a very good point. I'm gonna really think about this.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So next verse 10.
Verse 10. We asita alpi hadbar asher yagidu lekamin amakom hahu asher yibcha yehwa we shamarta la asot kekol asher yoruka.
Wonderful. And so you shall do according to the authority of the thing that they shall inform you. From that place. That's very important too. From that place. Okay? Which Adonai shall choose, and you shall be careful to do according to that which they shall instruct you. Now, this word here is really interesting because it says Yorucha, and the root of Yorucha is Yara, which is where you get the word Torah. So this is not just saying whatever their opinions are. Their opinions actually hold weight of a Torah ruling.
Okay.
Would there be any difference in meaning?
Verse.
Would there be any difference in meaning in a translation from that place or from the place? The reason I ask is because the Lubavitch translation seems to translate it wrong. They use the word the instead of that, and it's obviously that.
Yeah. Hamakom hahu.
Maybe they're talking, Bruce. Maybe they're talking about 770.
That's the place.
Do you guys all know there's I'm sure Bruce knows this, but the rest of you guys know there's an actual replica of 770 in Israel?
Right. Really?
Yeah. Yep. In Kfar Chabad, right outside of Tel Aviv.
Right.
They've taken the building that's in Brooklyn and they've replicated it.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I remember the last time I went there.
Mm-hmm.
The last time I went there, we'd walk around in the evening because it was so hot. It was in July. And you know how hot it is in Jerusalem in July.
Oh yeah, it can be. Yeah.
And so we would go out in the evening and we walk around, because it was really nice and cool. And I kept seeing these signs. It was almost like it was glowing in the dark. And I was like, what the heck are these signs, And so finally I went up to one and looked at it. And it was Schneerson saying, our Messiah is coming. Or something.
Oh yeah, they're all over the place. Yeah, all over the place. On the buses in Jerusalem, you can see them on the buses. You're standing there on the street, and all of a sudden a bus comes by, and you see Schneerson waving at you on the signs. Like, we want Mashiach now, or whatever. Oh yeah, they take that. They really take it seriously.
I'm just wondering how many people have passed out from holding their breath.
I think more and more every day.
So,
yeah. Also, I wanted to point out something here, which is that, okay, so it says in just going back to verse 9 very briefly. So, Ubat el Kohanim Leviim ve'el Shofet. So there's multiple Kohanim, there's multiple Leviim, but there's one Shofet, okay? And throughout the Tanakh, part of the Tanakh, we see again and again that the main person judging the nation is always a single judge, right? Whether it's Othniel or Dvorah or Gidon or Shimshon or whatever the case may be, there's always one person at the top of the hierarchy, usually a prophet, him or herself, in the case of Dvorah herself, and speaking directly to Yehovah, speaking directly to God. So this goes back to what we saw before, that there's one place, right? Not multiple places. The idol worshippers, they have many, many places under, on top of every hill and under every leafy tree, is where they worship their idols. The matzevot we saw before, many places all over the place. You shall not have a matzevah. You should have one place that you go to, a single temple where you worship a single God, and there's a single chain of hierarchy which terminates on, at least in the earthly realm, with the single judge, right? Not 5 judges that are kind of competing and telling, giving different judgments, but the single judge at the top of the pyramid, actually, and then God is above it, because usually that judge is a prophet. And in the later days, when you had a kind of separation between, I guess you can call it heavenly and earthly powers, that's when the nation requested a king, and they got their first king, which was Shaul. Then you kind of had a separation. So the king became the representation of the earthly powers, and the kings were no longer prophets. David was not a prophet. Saul was not a prophet, even though it does say for a brief moment that Saul was, is Saul counted among one of the prophets, right? If you guys know that from 1 Samuel. But at any rate, the kings were not prophets, but then they always had a prophet nearby to advise them, right? So you had, in the case of Saul, you had Samuel. In the case of David, you had Nathan, et cetera, et cetera. So the point being is that there's always a single kind of chain of hierarchy leading right up to that single shofet who's sitting at that one specific place, that single place where God is also present there in that place, because that's the place where he chooses for his name to dwell, and he's making a single judgment which you have to follow on pain of death. If you go to the left or right from that judgment, then you're put to death. So as many people pointed out, many gods, many places of worship, many judges, many everything. One God, one place of worship, one judge, one temple, etc. So you see the
good point.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point. Because if you have a high priest here and another one 3 blocks up the road, there's no continuity.
Right. Exactly.
I
There's no hierarchy.
I have a question about that. Was Natan and Samuel Kohanim?
Samuel was descended from the Levites, according to the genealogy. I can't remember whether he was a Kohen or not.
No, Samuel was not a Kohen.
Kohanim.
Samuel was a judge. Samuel was a judge. No. It could be either the Kohanim, the Leviim, or the judge. So the Kohanim and the Leviim, if you ask me, they're going to be dealing more with, I guess you would say in modern parlance, is the chicken kosher or not? They're going to be dealing more with religious issues, right? Blemish. You have a blemish and you have to get it cleared, or you have a certain sacrifice that you need to bring, but the judge is dealing, as we saw in verse where was it? They're going to be in verse 8. They're going to be dealing. They're going to be dealing with dam ladam, din ladin, nega la nega, even though that applies to all. But the shofet, I think, is going to be dealing more with day-to-day issues such as I don't know. I mean, you could take the example of when the two
whoever the judge
Solomon,
is, it doesn't really matter. The agreement would have had to be from all of them together, which is why it's in the plural. Whatever they instruct and whatever they tell you, and according to their words, you'll have to do it. They work in conjunction, and we see that in the Torah whenever it talks about whenever it had some controversy. I can't remember the exact verse. We'll be reading it here shortly. In the next few weeks, we'll actually read the verse I'm talking about here. It tells you that you have to call for the Kohanim Haleviim, because it's these people who God chose to minister in His place, and it's by their word that every nega is to be determined.
You call me?
Listen, the province of the Kohanim and the Leviim is the temple, and everything having to do with temple, and everything having to do with purity and impurity and the sacrificial system. I think that's clear. And the province of the judge is for day-to-day issues.
Because their job is to teach the Torah to the people, and the Torah doesn't only talk about clean and unclean, although that's a part of it. The Torah also talks about all the different what we would call civil versus religious or purity or something like that. I don't know the exact term, but that's also in the Torah, and that's also part of the job.
They might be teaching it, but I don't think that when they're judging, I don't think they're judging on those particular issues. I think they're judging mostly.
Well, let's look at it this way. If there's a problem, here, let's find out what we're talking about. It says dam ladam, din ladin, nega wa nega. Or it says whatever, divrei revolt, whatever the matter of controversy happens to be.
Right.
Why would we need Levites to tell me, whether I've got to take my clothes off, or I should hang out outside, or go do?
Hold on,
sorry,
somebody
broke up.
Yeah, somebody broke up.
The point is they're involved in this judgment, and they have a voice in it. It's not just the Shofet who issues any decree. It's the Shofet with these Levites, these Kohanim.
First of all, nega la nega, you can interpret as having to do with the issue of blemishes, and that's purity versus impurity. It's not clear what that means. That could also mean maybe bruises, where people get into a fight and bruise each other. But you can interpret that as referring specifically. I can hear a thing. Hello?
I hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay. All right. I don't know how. But so you can interpret nega la nega as speaking about the various blemishes of tzara'at, of what's called leprosy, et cetera, and that might be referring to the Levium also. But the more of the point is that if you look at the rest of the Nach, you don't see when people have disputes, they're not going to the Kohanim and the Levites except for religious issues. They're going to the judge. Okay. When the two prostitutes, again, to take a famous example, when the two prostitutes cannot decide or have a dispute over whose baby, over who that baby belongs to, they don't go to the Levites or the Kohanim. They go to Solomon. He's the judge. And many times throughout the Nach, especially in the book of Judges, you'll see it says so and so judged Israel in those days. Samson judged Israel for 40 years. Devorah judged Israel under the date tree of Devorah, etc. So I think there is a difference. I think that there's clear provinces. It's my understanding. There's clear provinces where the Kohanim and the Leviim, they're dealing with the temple. They're dealing with the sacrificial system, the tithes. I mean, that's a lot to deal with right there. And the judge is dealing with the other things. Also, we see when we go to where was it again? Hold on a second. In the gates, it doesn't say. I'm just trying to find the verse. Was it 17:9? Keep 11. I can't find it now. Anyway, that's my main point. I think there's a single judge that's at the head of the nation. And we see this from the Nah. In the early days, it's an actual judge who is usually almost always a prophet. In the later days, that separates out. The king is the judge, and then he has a prophet who's communicating with God, basically speaking to him when necessary. That was kind of the curse that came upon the curse, the decision that Yahweh made once the Israelites requested that there be a king. So, okay,
I can see that because I can see that because Shaul had Shemuel, David
Right.
had Nathan,
Right.
and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Nathaniel, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So in other words, you were saying there's a separation of church and state.
I think so. I think there's a certain separation of church and state. You could put it that way. Although, there... okay.
I'm going to read a couple verses from Ezekiel. Ezekiel, who was a Kohen. He was a prophet.
Right.
And he's talking about the days from his point of view of a coming return to the temple and so forth. And he talks about the Sabbathite Levites who would be Kohanim. And it says, this is in 44:23, and it says, "Wa'eth ami yoru bein chodesh lechol uvein tamei latahor yodeum wa'al riv hima ya'amadu lishpat b'mishpati وشفتوه et Torah وet." I gotta turn the page, there's 10 pages. وet هقتاي بكل موعدي يشمروا وet شبثوثاي يقدشوا. And this is what we see also in the time of David. All right, David set up the judges from the tribe of Kohath. Yehoshaphat followed his example. Yehoshaphat followed his examples and set those Levites throughout the land of Israel, and the main port with the Kohen Gadol there. Now there was two people involved. One was the Kohen Gadol, and one was a minister of Yehoshaphat, and said that he would handle the affairs of the king, and the Kohen Gadol will handle the affairs of God.
Okay.
So whatever you consider the affairs of God is, I don't know. But I'm just saying. The judge, I don't care who he is. He could be whoever he is. He can't act alone according to this.
I disagree with that. I think it's speaking about, and then we can just move on because we just agree to disagree, or else we're going to just get bogged down. I think it's speaking about, certain that, we see in the Nach that the judge is making. Solomon did not consult anyone when he was about to cut the baby in half. Okay, he didn't consult with the Levites of Kohanim. He made his own judgment because that's what the head of state does.
That's right. David had sex with Bathsheba. That's
Solomon did not have sex with Bathsheba. Solomon slept with Bathsheba's
David
daughter.
had sex with Bathsheba.
Well,
Son.
I see.
Did I say Solomon?
I can see how the Solomonic legislation, I suppose, if you want to call it that, or the judgment that Solomon had given, being that it was two prostitutes arguing over who the mother of this child was, I would not necessarily dictate that as a matter that a prophet would have to step in, because he used his wisdom to be able to adjudicate and say, hey, well, cut it in half, and the one that was crying, boom, all right, that's your mother there. However, if for instance, if we go back to I want to say Bamidbar, I forget what chapter and verse, but dealing with the adulterous woman, you know what I'm saying, and they made her drink the bitter waters and such like that. I don't see a king. I don't see that being a state matter, but more of something out of his reach. Right. The Kohen Gadol is the one that facilitated that, because it was something that really no man could know. You know, there's no way of
that's the
telling.
point. That's kind of the province of God, right? That's judged in a sense in a religious setting, right? Not in a secular setting. So anyway.
Well, one thing I have to say too is we have to decide also, are municipal judges allowed to issue death sentences? And I would say, yeah, because the only matters that come to this centralized court are things that can't be decided. That's too wondrous, or too hard. When you have clear-cut cases, that doesn't have to be brought. You understand? When you're able to adjudicate it in your municipality, there's no need to take that to a higher court. And so the one question you have to ask, are the municipal judges allowed to issue death sentences? And I would say absolutely. And we see that throughout the Tanakh. You don't have, when you have clear-cut case. And now you have to also decide too between a prophet. A prophet doesn't need permission to do anything. Everybody's required to obey the prophet if he's a prophet of God, because that's what we're told in the Torah. You know, so he would trump even the king, technically.
Well, the prophet is generally, once the kings come around, the prophets are not generally judging. They're generally just delivering messages. And that occurs when you have the separation.
And I don't care who the king is, he's got to obey the voice of the prophet. The king can't.
Well, he doesn't have to, but if it's in his best interest to do
he can do whatever he wants, but he'll pay for it. You're right.
Right.
He can do whatever he wants, but he'll pay for it. He will have consequences.
Obviously.
So we're required to obey the mouth of the prophet that comes. But aside from the prophets, you know, when we have these, because aside from the 70 elders who were chosen by God to be prophets to stand with Moses to adjudicate, and this is something that has to be explained. We have all this talk about Sanhedrin, amongst the rabbis. And they want to say, oh, we have this authority from these 70 elders. And that's not true. The 70 elders that were chosen by Moses, these were 70 people that it says they took the spirit of heart of the spirit of Moses and put upon them, and they became prophets. And it says specifically they were allowed to carry the people and share the burden along with Moses.
That's a good point.
Other judges outside of these 70, they had to bring those hard cases to them because they weren't prophets themselves. The prophets, they received divine instructions from God himself. And so they were able to adjudicate cases amongst Israel without having to go bug Moses every time something comes up. And that's the point of the 70 elders. And they lasted until the death of Joshua. And after that time, that office ended and it was never mentioned again.
If I may, using the case of David or Bathsheba, Nathaniel had to, bring him to, he had to bring David to earth, so to speak, with his example of the lamb, this guy got as many as he wanted. What is he taking this other guy's stuff for?
Yeah.
How dare he? Get rid of him. Then Nathaniel was like, hey man, look in the mirror, bro. I think that the national prophet served as a counterbalance to the authority of the king.
Checks and balances.
The prophet was in a sense the prophet was in a sense, once the kings came around and the judge was no longer a prophet, right? So you have in the book of Judges, the judges were actually prophets themselves. Samuel was a prophet.
Yeah.
Once you have that separation, once Israel is upset by losing in battle and they request a king, then that separates out. Now you have prophecy going to the prophets, and the kings themselves are now the worldly leaders who are no longer they no longer have the gift of prophecy. So the only one who can trump the kings at that point, since they're not prophets themselves, is a prophet that comes along like Nathan did and gives a message from God, because the only one above the king at this point is God himself, right? And since the kings are not in contact with God the way they were in the time of the judges, because they themselves are not prophets, so they have to rely on these other prophets to come along and relay messages from God. So
And I can even
We're about to read about the king here in just a minute.
Yeah,
I
and
can
if I
even,
say one more thing, so it's you know, the hierarchy in the time of the judges was directly from the judge, who was in direct contact up to God. When Israel sinned and requested a king, that chain was broken, and now you have to have these, I guess you could call these, third party kind of external prophets who are coming along and they're delivering messages from God. But at the end of the day, it's the king's decision on this, in this worldly realm, what he does and how the country is run, how the state is run, whatever you want to call it. So
I agree. I'll even throw Yehiskiyahu and Yeshayahu in that. With when the Rabshakeh came and boasting upon his king's power and military prowess, Yehiskiyahu fell on his face. He rent his clothes. He ain't know what to do. But it was Yeshayahu that was able to say, "Hey, don't worry, man. You gonna have this, that, and the third happen, and you'll see the righteousness of your God." So I would wholeheartedly agree that the prophet takes on the things that the king has absolutely no means of doing for himself in terms of judgment and jurisprudence.
And in the time of the judges, you didn't see that at all. You don't see cases where somebody comes to a prophet comes to Shimshon and says such and such, or a prophet comes to Devorah and says such and such, because they themselves were prophets. They were the prophets right there. That was the break that occurred during the time of after at the end of Samuel's life when the people requested a king.
Yeah, I see what you're getting at.
So therefore, to take it back to this verse, you always have, even in the time of the judges in the book of Judges, and later in the time of the kings, starting in the end of the book of First Samuel and so on, you always have a single authority at the top, and that goes back again to this whole monotheistic idea: one place, one God, one singular authority. Whether he's right or wrong, he's a singular authority. And if he's wrong, the prophet will come along and correct him, as Nathan did in the case of Bathsheba. Anyway, I guess that's the main point I kind of wanted to make through these verses. All right, should we go on?
Yeah, I'm good to go. What are we at, 11?
12, I think.
All right.
Oh, no, it's 11.
That's 11. All right, so Al-Pi HaTorah Asher Yaruka wa Al-Hamishbet Asher Ya'amru Leka Ta'ase Lo Tasor Min Hadabar Asher Yagidu Leka Yamin Ushemel Ushemol.
Small.
Small, yeah, it was small. I'm sorry. Got a little piece of lint on my phone.
Sometimes on the phone it's a little crack on the screen, and then it throws it completely. You know what I mean?
No,
I've had that happen.
Because I'm sitting there, I was about to read it Ushomol, Ushomol. Well, there's clearly a Shiva there, but yeah, or small.
Right. Yeah.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear.
Okay,
Yeah, kind of.
My Bluetooth just died.
Oh man.
I kind of hear you, Jaco, but it's kind of soft.
It is soft. That's better.
Let me see if I can change some things here. Did Bruce have to go, or?
I don't know. He didn't say anything.
You guys tired of us not reading Torah?
Yes, maybe. And I've actually got to get going soon because it's been about 3 hours, so I'm a couple more verses.
Damn, it has?
Yeah. Yep.
Yes.
I know, time flies when you're having fun. Yep.
We started at 3 o'clock my time, and so it's 6 o'clock now. So we've been at it for 3 hours.
3 hours.
Man.
So I'll read to the next Ketuma if you want, and then we can talk about it. Because this is just basically the end part of that.
Sounds good.
So starting at verse 11, Al-Pi HaTorah Asher Yorucha wa Al-Hamishpat Asher Yomeru Lecha Ta'aseh Lo Thasur من هدفار أشر يجيد لخا يمين وسيمول. And according to the authority of the instruction that they shall instruct you, and according to the judgment which they shall say to you, you shall do. You shall not leave from the thing that they shall inform you to the right or to the left, which lets you know that the jurisprudence from this court has the weight of Torah.
Why? Because you're saying because it's al pi Torah.
It's not just al-hapi ha-Torah. It says whatever the thing is that they shall instruct you. That's the point. You know, if it was so cut and clear, then why even go to them? Okay. So it's their instruction that we're seeking, which is probably why you would have to have more than just one person. You know, in a council, you can discuss it and we can hash it out like we're doing here. You know, it could be that someone's life depends on it, and it shouldn't be just so okay, whatever, you know. وهعيش أشر يعسي بزادون لفلتي شموع الهكوهين هأميد لشارت شام את אדוני אלוהיך, או אל השופט, ומד האיש ההוא, וביערת הרע ישראל. And the man, women are exempted from this part, and the man that shall do bizadon, which means insolently, and does not listening to the Kohen that stands to as a minister there of Adonai, your God, or to the judge, then that man shall die, and so shall you put away the evil from amongst Israel. So like I said, women are exempted from this.
Where do you get that idea from again?
Waha'ish asher yaseh.
Yes, but
Hahish hahu. I'm just being facetious.
Oh, okay. All right. I thought we were gonna have another 10-minute sidetrack. Okay. Glad you're being facetious.
I can't remember who asked me. Somebody asked me in one of my groups that I'm in about tzitzit, and
right.
Yeah, that was me.
Okay.
Yeah,
and
that guy.
They were asking about the women. Said, "Oh, women don't have to wear it because it was only the masculinist as Bnei Yisrael." And I was like, "That's not necessarily the case, because almost the overwhelming majority of the commandments are given in the masculine. So that would mean that women aren't liable to do any of those that are in the masculine, except for those specifically mentioned
in the feminine."
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy, he was just ranting, I guess. I don't know what was wrong with that guy.
Yeah. وَقُلْ هَعَامْ يِشْمَعُوا وَيَرَاءُ وَلَوْ يَزِدُونَ عُودٍ. And this is the point of doing this publicly. And all the people shall listen and fear, and they shall not anymore act insolently. And that's the end of the section.
Yeah.
And I would
we
like
can go
to
on,
say,
actually. If you want to go on, I don't mind. Yeah, I don't mind.
Man, hey,
I don't mind.
you know me, Melech. I'll go all
You'll go until 3 a.m.
I think these guys here will tell you that too.
Yeah, I got proof.
Yeah. When I first started off, Yaakov was sending me videos at 2-3 in the damn morning.
I was just reading the other day. What was it? It was there's an account of a visitor to the deserts in, I think it was in Iran, if I'm not mistaken, maybe a century ago or 2 centuries ago. And there's a punishment that's been actually carried out for maybe, I don't know, hundreds if not thousands of years, which is known as, I can't remember the technical name, but basically you enclose somebody inside a wall. So basically, if I don't know, if someone steals a camel or something like that, you take them and you basically build a brick house around them, and you just leave them there in the middle of the desert. And so one of the reasons they're serious, it's called immoration, I think, because like the word mural, I think from the Latin word muris or something like that. I think it's called immoration. You could look it up. It's really kind of scary. so they spoke about, yeah, it really is crazy. And they spoke about how in the Iranian desert, this was a common punishment for, I guess, stealing or other things. And one of the reasons they would, and this visitor reports how he would be going through the desert, and every so often he'd see like this brick structure, you know, and it meant to serve as a reminder. You see this brick structure, and you know, there's a skeleton, rotting in there because he was immured. He was immune. I can't remember what it's called. Not immured.
Or just keep him in there to death, huh?
Yeah, they take you. They put you in. They build the brick structure around you or whatever it is, you know, and they leave you there. That's it. And they would
build your tomb.
Yeah. And they would talk about how people would hear yells and screams. Like the screams would get really bad on the first and second day, and then by the third day, total silence. Yeah. So, don't steal a camel in the Iranian desert, especially if it's 100 years ago.
Don't steal one anywhere.
Yeah. So it's the same idea, right? That a lot of punishments. I mean, even in a lot of public executions and a lot of stuff like that. Oh, who is it? I'm trying to think now. I don't know. I can't think of the example, but where they took. Was it? I can't remember now. Where they took the thumbs and the fingernails and they cut them off and they hung them on the wall. Was that with Ahab? I can't remember now. But a lot of punishments are meant to be very public, so as to scare the rest of the people into, you know, thinking twice before they commit the same crime. So.
Got to keep brushing my beard, man.
Yeah.
You guys got to grow a beard.
I'm trying to, man. What
Come
you
on,
use?
Mate. You know what I do? I don't shave.
Yeah, I done got to that point too. You know what I'm saying? I just let it do what it does. Whatever falls out, falls out. You know?
I'm gonna have to say, my wife says, Yaakov, you're just like a woman now with your beard. You know, once it gets long enough, I think I'm gonna put locks in there. You know, I'm gonna braid. I'm gonna try to braid. Yeah, braid them out. But yeah, now every time I see myself here in the video, and I just I have this urge to brush my beard.
What you should do, man, just throw some little bits of bone at the end of your locks. You know what I'm saying? Somebody talk crazy to you, just whip your head to the left. You know.
Yeah. I don't know. You guys might be too young to remember this. There was a movie called Yellowbeard. It was a comedy. Man, I want to say that was in the early 80s. But this guy, he was a pirate. And he had this really big, long, blonde beard. And what he would do is he'd take at the very end of it, he'd put marijuana cigarettes. And it'd be burning. And it was funny.
That's funny.
Okay, so let's continue. I got to get back to where I was.
Yeah, we're in 14.
Is that 14?
Wait a minute.
By the way, here it is. I looked at it. It's called immurement. If you want to, you know, if you ever want to have some fun. Immurement. IMM.
Immurement. Yeah, I'll have to look that up later.
Yeah. Look it up.
So
IMMUREMENT. Immurement. All right. Yeah. Verse 14.
כי תבוא אל הארץ אשר אדוני אלוהיך נותן לך וירשת וישבת בה ואמרת אשימה עלי מלך ככל הגויים אשר סביבותיי. Right. And when you shall come to the land, which Adonai your God is giving to you, and you shall inherit it, and you shall live there, and you shall say, and if you shall say, or however, let me set over me a king. This is the asima, which is what's called the cohortative, and it says usually identify that with the hey ending, but the cohortative is sometimes translated as let me, and I don't like to use that let because that's an old English word for permission. This is actually showing an intention, saying I would like, or I will, or I want to set over me a king. Just like the nations that are around me.
Right.
Sum tasim.
And if I could just point out, okay, go ahead, finish all these verses and I'll make the point because it's relevant to all of them.
Sum tasim aleicha melech asher yivhar Adonai Elohecha bo mikrev achicha tasim aleicha melech lo tuchal lathet aleicha ish nochri asher lo achicha hu. You shall certainly set over you a king, which Adonai your God shall choose him. From amongst your brethren, you shall set a king over you. You are not allowed, or you're not able to set over you a foreign man,
which is
not from your brothers.
If I can make a couple of points here. So number one, in my opinion, so the word achim specifically implies a native-born Israelite. So someone who can trace his fatherly line back to Yaakov. In other words, what this means is that someone who is a ger, which we call a ger, someone who is quote unquote a convert, they might call it in modern days, is not allowed to be king over Israel. Not just a complete foreigner, but somebody who is not actually a descendant of Jacob is not allowed to be king over Israel. I think that's one point. Yaakov, I'm curious your opinion about that one.
Well, I've thought about it a lot, and there is only one mention in the entire Torah of people being called the brothers of Israel, and that was from Moses, when Moses said to his emissaries, we're going to the land of Esau. You go and say, hey, Israel, your brother is coming. Now we're told we're not allowed to hate an Edomite because he's our brother. And so, if we say that the word brother means specifically one born of Jacob, that would be problematic. Now I agree that he had to be a king from the Israelites. I'm not disagreeing there. But the idea that when you talk about brother here in this context, or not necessarily in this context, but in a broad sense, brother, meaning he has to be from amongst the native-born Israelites, that would be a bit problematic.
Okay. I'm going to disagree again because I think that it's two completely different contexts, but we don't have to go into a long thing. The context is speaking about the larger surrounding community, right?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, about the surrounding nations, and Esau was the brother of Yaakov. So there, the context makes sense. But in this case, it's speaking about achicha. The context here is right. It's not talking about surrounding nations. I mean, by if you want to take your logic to its logical extreme, then you could say an Edomite without converting could be king over Israel. That doesn't make any sense, right?
No, I think that's not what I'm saying.
No, I know you're not saying that.
I'm saying here, I'm agreeing that it's got to be an Israelite, but just
okay.
I want to clarify, just because we say the word achi.
Okay. I misunderstood you.
That doesn't necessarily mean you have to be born from Israel.
Okay.
But I agree contextually. This is talking about the Israelites, and it would be the tribes.
Okay. All right, I'm not sure we agree or disagree, but let's go on. And the other thing I want to point out is of course in verse 14, where it speaks about in the future if you shall want a king, that actually comes true in the book of Samuel. In 1 Samuel chapter 8 is where the people clamor for a king.
You know what I find interesting about the judges and the kings, the majority of the judges, I want to say only one or two were from one of the southern tribes. The rest of them were from northern tribes. And the first actual king that we see chosen by Samuel was from the tribe of Benjamin, which was also technically a northern tribe, but they were absorbed by the tribe of Judah, which makes, and that's another interesting thing too. Jerusalem was not actually in the inheritance of Judah. Jerusalem is actually in the inheritance of Benjamin. And Benjamin stood as a buffer between Judah and Ephraim.
I would like to add very quickly, and this may be a matter of debate or not, I have no idea. But speaking of Melech Shaul, it says that he was Ben Cushi, right? Now, one can say that, that was Kish. One could say that, that's a proper name or whatnot. But also notice that we could, I dare say, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I dare say that if we're talking Ben Cushi, and we're looking at Cushi in the sense of as a gentilic, son of a Cushite.
Well, it doesn't say.
Yeah, sorry, man. I gotta disagree with you on that.
Hey, no. That's what I'm saying.
First of all, his father's name was Kish.
I'm going completely off the head here. I'm not reading. You know what I'm saying? So I'm very much open to correction. But I'm just, okay. Well, never mind. That dares that. that was
I'm pretty sure also that Kish's specific lineage is given, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's from the tribe of Benjamin.
Yeah. Right. I get. No, I'm not disputing that at all. It was just an idea that came off the top of the head. Granted, but it was an idea that came to mind.
All right. Well, nice try.
Yeah. Hey, thank you. I appreciate it. It was a swing and a miss.
Gotcha. And here it says, actually, in Samuel chapter 9, verse 1. It gives Kish's specific lineage.
Yep, Kish.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna check that out real quick. Yeah, that's
I'll read it right now.
Good, thank you.
Well, I want to make a point too. That it's not the Cush, a Cushi or a Cushite is spelled with a kaf.
And this is what a
Kish is with a kof. Yeah.
A kof. Okay. Okay. No, hey, that's so you can't get any can't even get any clearer than that. I'm sorry about that.
That's all right. Okay, so let's see here. All right, should we go on?
Yeah, ويهي إيش من بنيامين وشمو كيش بن أبيئيل بن سرور بن بكورة بن أفية بن إيش يميني Gibor Chaim. And that's the lineage of Kish, who was the father of Shaul.
Yep, it sure does say Kish. It does say Kish. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Cool.
Okay, where were we at now?
17, I believe.
Yeah.
17. Okay.
16.
No.
We didn't do 16 yet.
16, yeah, 16. Raq lo yarbelo susim وَلَوْ يَشِيف et ha'am mitreima lima'an harboth sus وَأَدونai mar lachem lo thosifun l'shuv b'derech hazeh od. Only he shall not multiply for himself horses, And he shall not return the people to Egypt for the purpose of multiplying horses, as Adonai has said to you, you shall no longer return on that way or in that way.
Can I tell a very quick funny story?
Yeah.
When I was learning at yeshiva in Jerusalem, in Machol Meir, I had a rabbi who told the story about how he had over for his Passover Seder. He had two young Jewish people who were, traveling through Israel. So he invited them over to the Passover Seder. And they're sitting, they're doing the Passover Seder. And about halfway through the Passover Seder, they say, they stand up and they say, "Thank you very much, Rabbi, but we have to get going." And so he says, "You have to get going. Where are you guys going now? It's the middle of the Passover Seder." He says, "We have to catch a bus to Egypt, to Cairo. We have to be there by tonight." So they actually got up in the middle of the Passover Seder to return to Egypt.
What?
It's a true story. I mean, according to this rabbi, it's a true story.
That is funny.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, mid sentence. Why your mere Elohim? Oh, gotta go.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, he always tells the story. Yep, they got up in the middle of the Passover Seder to go to Egypt. So, anyway.
That's crazy.
Okay, so, but serious question here. I have to admit, I've never understood this. What is the point of saying, what is the connection between going back to Egypt and having lots of horses? I just don't get it.
Well, the only thing I can think of is that we'll talk about this here in a minute. Is that in fact we're told in another place. I have to find it. The king here is told not to multiply actually wives or horses.
Horses or gold, right? Mm-hmm.
Or gold. And so this has to do with wealth. And so
but what does that have to do with Egypt? Right, clearly.
Well,
Seuss is, having a large army, having lots of women, having lots of gold and silver. They don't want, he didn't want, God did not want the ancient Israelite kings to live like, a Turkish sultan or something like that, right?
Right. Now, the sending of the Israelites back into Egypt would be the king sending servants from Israel. Now, we see that the Israelites become indentured servants to other Israelites, and they're allowed to be indentured servants only until the time of the Jubilee, and then they have to be set free. Now,
every 7 years they have to be set free, not the Jubilee. Hebrew slave is set free on the Shemitah year, not the Jubilee year.
I don't know. I thought it was the Jubilee. Anyway, whatever. They have to be set free.
Mm-hmm.
They can't be kept in perpetuity. There's only one case where an Israelite can remain permanently enslaved. That's if while he was if he was in his indentured servitude, and his master gives him a wife, and he has children. Well, the wife and children don't belong to the slave; they belong to the master. So whenever his time of servitude's up, now if he's a good guy, then his master say, "Look, these are your wife and kids. Go." I would say take your wife and kids too. But in case the master says no, that's his right. That's his property. And in that case, if the slave goes away, if the Hebrew slave goes away, then he goes away all by himself. The only way he would go away with his wife and children was if he entered into servitude with his wife and children. So if he came with them, he goes with them. If he came alone, then he goes out alone. He's not allowed to take the wife. So in that case, only in that case are we allowed to keep a Hebrew as a perpetual slave. And that's because his own choice says, I love my master and I love my wife and children. And I don't want to go away alone. And so that's the only case. But this is the way I see this verse. This is talking about the king becoming arrogant over his brothers, which is what he's about to be warned against.
Right.
About him and his dynasty remain on the throne.
Right.
Is by not sending the Israelites back into Egypt. And the point of this is about generating more wealth for himself.
Okay. But what does that have to do with sending the nation, the people back to Egypt? I've never gotten the connection. Years I've thought about it, and I still don't get it.
It's not that he's sending the nation. It's just that he won't return you to Egypt for the sake of horses. Okay? That's meaning that he's not swapping Hebrew slaves for horses.
Okay, interesting.
That's where I would look at it.
All right, I got you. Okay, and verse 17. I'll take this one.
Okay.
Okay, good. Yeah. All right. V'lo yarbe lo nashim v'lo yisur levavo v'chesef v'zahav lo yarbe lo ma'od. So not too many women, not too much gold and silver, and that's all it speaks about there. So not too many horses, not a large army, not too many concubines, and not too much wealth. He shouldn't be that
he doesn't cause his heart to depart.
Right. As happened with Solomon in the end of his reign, right?
That's right.
He married all the foreign women, and they tempted him into idol worship.
And in that same caveat, if we look at who exactly he was marrying, he wasn't marrying just common. He just wasn't like walking up to the street. Hey, you. Yeah, I like you. There was a lot of political alliances there, and if you're dealing with political alliances, then you have to act in the interests of whomever you're allied with, as well as your own. So I could definitely see why there's a admonition to not multiply these things unto yourself, because eventually they're going to come from other sources. And if you got other people in your pocket, then we'll just look at the United States presidency, and that's about all I can say about that.
Well, one of the prophetical accusations against the Israelites right before the time of that Nebuchadnezzar came, and also afterwards when Nehemiah and Ezra brought the Israelites back, one of the accusations was that they were keeping the Hebrews in perpetuity as slaves. And that was the rebuke that Ezra and Nehemiah gave to the exiles. Said, look, you're holding your brother as a slave forever, when it says in the Torah we shouldn't do that. And so these two, the Nehemiah and Ezra, made those people give up their slaves that they had taken from the Israelites.
Right.
And this is what we're getting at here in this part. The all of this has a point. This is the liman. This is the result and the point of this commandment. Has to do with his heart leaving from the Torah and his heart being exalted above his brethren, which is what we're about to read. Right.
I mean, just a quick comment. I mean, all you have to do is look at some of the kings of some of the other nations and see why this, the trouble that a king who has too much of, who has no limits can get himself into, right? Look at some of the Roman empires, or, even some leaders today, even some kings today, live lifestyles which end up just having no restraint whatsoever. So, as this king, the king of Israel always has to remember that God is above him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, Melech.
Okay, verse 18. ויחק שבטו על כיסא ממלכתו וכתב לו את משנה התורה הזאת על ספר מלפני הכהנים הלוויים. So, and when he shall be sitting, what's that?
The Mishnah Torah, how about that?
Yeah, right.
That's funny.
That's where they get. No, but it's an interesting point, because the rabbis, they get a lot of the names of their various books, and even in some of the names of the rabbis themselves, from verses in the Torah or in the Tanakh. So that's probably where they got this from. Okay, so when it shall be that he's seated upon his throne, he should write for himself a copy of this Torah, of this instruction, upon a scroll in front of, or I guess in conjunction with, I'll translate that as together with the literally in front of the Kohen, the Kohens and the Levites, the Kohanim and the priests and the Levites. Verse 19. Anyone want to say anything about that verse?
No, it just we see at the end of this book where it's completed. Moses finishes writing it, and he delivers this the Sefer HaBrit, the scroll, to the Levites and Kohanim. And an interesting thing also, it says he gathered the elders of the Israelites and also the Kohanim. He read it in their ears first. He read the whole thing, and then he gave it to the Kohanim and also to the elders of Israel. Yeah. And the only way he could have given it to the Kohanim and also to the elders of Israel, in my opinion, is if there was more than one copy. He gave one to the Levites. This is the one that he'll be copying from, the king. And then he gave also a copy to the other. Now, he was in the wilderness for 40 years. And it's possible that he had copies written up for these elders so that each tribal inheritance would at least have a copy of the Torah.
Yep.
I have a question. I have a question that I would have first asked the Chabadnik who translated into English. They translate HaKohanim HaLeviim as the Levitic Kohanim. And if you understand that the Kohanim are a subset of the Leviim, then you would have said the Kohanic Levites rather than the Levitical Kohanim, because all the Kohanim are Levites anyway. But then you go and look at the Hebrew, and it's the same thing. It's saying the Levitical Kohanim. The Levites are an adjective of the Kohanim. But that's stupid. It should be the Kohanim are the type of Levites, not the Levites are the type of Kohanim.
I think Bruce. I think the implication here is just it means the Kohanim and the Kohanim and the Levites. It's either meant implicitly or it's a scribal error. Maybe in different versions you'll have somewhere that have been lost. You'll have a vav there. I don't think you see this phrase anywhere else, and the phrase you always see is the Kohanim and the Leviim. So I think that's.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Is there? I do have a
disagree.
question. I do have a question concerning Hakonim Halloween. Is it possible that this is a construct relationship in the sense that that the Kohanim are indeed Levites, but not every Levite is a Kohen?
No,
that's basically what Bruce is saying. I think.
No.
I think that's what Bruce is saying, but I disagree. I think speaking about
the
Levite
here is actually an adjectival clause to the Kohen, where normally it would be the Levites having the Kohen as an adjective for them. But the point is, the reason why they point out that it had to be a Levitical Kohen is because we know in the Tanakh that not all Kohens were Levites.
What?
Yeah, that's a fact.
No, I'm sorry. I'm going to disagree. Yeah, I'm going to disagree with that too.
Yeah,
I think it just means
I'll tell you what. I don't want to gamble on Shabbat. Okay, but after the sunset, I'll send you my PayPal account so you can send me some money when you lose this bet.
No, I'm just confused because Aaron was a Levite.
That's a fact. But not all Kohanim in the Tanakh are Levites. Period.
How could that be?
No, that's not the point. You might have Kohanim who are okay. I'm not even arguing about that. But go ahead. Say what you want to say.
Even in the Torah, not all Kohanim were Levites.
Where?
Well, for instance,
Kohen. Okay, Yisrael was a Kohen. Okay.
Yes. I was going to point that out, but
the sons of David. The sons of David were called Kohanim. It says Ubenei David Kohanim. Okay. That's in the book of Samuel. You see later that other people were called the Kohen for the king, who were non-Levites. They're actually not descended from the Levites, nor from the house of Aaron. So the point is, this is being specified that you can't just go to anybody who's a Kohen. He has to be a Levitical Kohen here. That's why it always says.
That makes sense. If that's
No,
true,
I strongly disagree with that, because whenever it says Cohen in the context of Israel, it's always implying the sons of Aaron. It's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be, and you don't see this construct anywhere else. I believe it's just either implied or it's a scribal error.
How do you explain David's sons being Kohanim? That's in the context of Israelites.
Let's see the verse.
Okay.
And while we're looking, if I may, novice that I am, we're in the setting where Moshe is having his final sit down with the Israelites, and he's instructing them on what to do in the land that they go, in the land where they go. We also now this is just from a book I read. Now this is not my own idea, but this is from a book that I read. In the next chapter, when we see the forbidding of going to particular magicians, so to speak, and the author of the book was relaying that because there was one that would be assigned to them, a prophet that would be assigned to them, or I guess a step in, or a substitute for Moshe would be assigned to them. The idea that he was presenting was that it was not saying that they should not go to prophets. The basic idea that he was saying was that they should go to prophets that were assigned by, Israelite jurisprudence, as opposed to going to the people in the land that they are in. Now, to go along with what Yaakov was saying, now if that is a true statement, that conditional, if that is a true statement, then it would go. It makes perfect sense to me in the sense that in the land where you're going, not every Kohen that you run into, because we know that they didn't wipe out every Canaanite.
I'm gonna post the verse here for everyone to see.
Okay.
All you have to do is look in the chat. But to finish, to wrap up my thought before I start rambling, I think there is a point in that the identification of the Levitical Kohen as opposed to just any old regular, because as we know, they went down and tore down worship places, sacrificial altars, and XYZ in Joshua's reign, if you will. And there would have been an off chance that a person would have gone to another priest, that may not have been a Levite, considering that we have all these different cultic identities surrounding the people of Israel before they went into Canaan.
What's the chapter and verse of this? Because I want to go see that in context.
2 Samuel 8:18.
Which Samuel?
2nd.
Okay. 8:18.
Yep.
Where it talks about a Kohen that's not a Levite.
Absolutely. This is the son of David.
I have to check that. This is great learning session, because I learned something new, if that's the case.
Yeah.
I'll check it out. Thank you.
I can read it to you. It says, Ubenayahu ben Yehoyada, Wahakarithi, Wahapalethi. That's the Afnachta, okay? Ubene David, Kohanim Hayu.
Yeah, but that's really not clear. I mean, that's a very general statement that could mean just about anything.
That's a Kohen who is a non-Levite.
Yes, but it's not speaking about a Kohen. I don't think it's speaking about a Kohen in the temple. It's clearly speaking about something else.
All I'm saying is the reason why you say HaKohen HaLevi is to make sure that you just don't go to someone who's called a Kohen. He has to.
I don't think so, because then why isn't that phrase used all over the Torah? And yet the phrase is never used. This is the only place I can think of that's used in the Torah. It always speaks about HaKohanim v'Halevi'im. Why is it every time it should say HaKohanim Halevi'im? There's no reason for this to stand out.
Okay.
No, really. What's the answer to that?
We all have homework.
It doesn't make sense to me. Straight out, it doesn't make sense to me, because if that were the case, then this is not a special case where it needs to be pointed out specifically that we're talking about Levitical Kohanim. Everywhere throughout the Torah, you would always see the phrase HaKohanim HaLeviim, HaKohanim HaLeviim. I can't think of any other place in the entire Torah that this phrase is ever used. But I can't think of a zillion places where the phrase HaKohanim v'HaLeviim is used.
Are you saying that the Vav is left 16, out by mistake?
Yes.
No.
It's either left out by mistake as a scribal error.
16 times in the Tanakh.
What?
16 times the exact phrase. 16 times in the Tanakh. It's found 1, 2, 3.
How about in the Torah? In the Torah.
4 times in the Torah, only in Devarim.
Okay. So why isn't it found other places in the Torah?
Yeah.
I don't think that's what it's saying at all.
And well, that's up to you. Yeah.
All right.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the only point for me that I take from it is that it's talking specifically about Kohanim who are Levites and not from any other group. We see in the Tanakh that there are Kohanim who are non-Levites. So we can't just say that the title Cohen guarantees a Levite.
But in the context of Israel, whenever the Torah is speaking about the Kohanim, it's clear that it's speaking about the descendants of Aharon.
I don't disagree with you.
So then there's no reason to point it out.
You know what? Now that you mention it, Melech,
Mm-hmm.
now that you mention it,
yeah,
I do recall seeing in Torah, Kohanim b'nei Aharon.
Yes.
That I think I'm trusting to my faulty memory, but okay. I think sometimes it says HaKohanim b'nei Aharon. Am I wrong?
No, you're right. It says
I am right.
It says the sons of Aaron who are the Kohanim, and but like I said, that's the way I see it, and everyone's free to disagree. But
all right, I'm gonna think about it, but
I'm gonna think about it too.
Yeah,
we're all gonna think about it, except Yaakov.
Yeah, I've already thought about it. That's why I know the verses.
Okay.
All right. Should we go on?
Yeah. Where were we? Well, the Mishnah Torah.
Yeah, Mishnah Torah.
So it says, well, Hayatha. No, we already read that too. Okay.
Oh, so we're on 20, the last of the setter.
Levilti, Urum Levavo, May Echav, Ulevilti, Min Hamitzwa, Yamin Usimol, Liman.
Everyone okay?
Yeah, Bill's allergic to my Torah reading.
Is that Bruce? Bruce, you okay?
That was an important addition to this discussion, this Torah discussion, because that was 7 sneezes. Do you know what that means?
Oh no! What does that mean?
You just caused the resurrection, Bruce. Congratulations.
That means that the Messiah is coming soon.
Oh man!
That's what my mother said. If you sneeze 7 times, it's a sign the Mashiach is coming soon.
Oh, really?
Okay.
All right.
So, Ulevilti, Sur Ben Hamitzwa, Yamin Usimol, Lima'an Ya'arichu, Yamin al Mamlachto, Hu Ubana, Bikir Yisrael. And so this is like I said, these are every time you see the Lima'an, this always has to do with a resultative effect of something else. It's,
Right.
It's, you have different ways of saying because. You've got
Mm-hmm.
avor and stuff like that, or akiv.
Mm-hmm.
But here, liman has to do with a resultative effect of something that was either done or not done. And here, we're being told that he's not allowed to return the Israelites to Egypt for horses, to amass gold or silver, or to multiply wives to himself. And the reasons for are severalfold. One is that he doesn't stray away from the Torah, and two, he doesn't lift up his heart against his brethren.
Right.
And so that's it.
All right, guys, I'm gonna have to get going because I haven't eaten in hours. So I'm gonna go grab a bite to eat. So now I really do have to get going. And
I
it's
think I'm going to leave too, so
Yeah,
that I
yeah.
could finish reading, because it's already the end of Shabbos here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Shavua
Yaakov.
Tov.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was great learning.
Yeah, it really was. It was awesome. These
Same
studies.
time, same channel next Shabbat.
Yep. Every
Tell
Shabbat
your
from now on.
friends.
We're doing it.
Tell
Yep.
your friends about me. I'll be here all week.
That's funny.
Good night,
All right,
gentlemen.
Yaakov.
Good night.
Yep.
Enjoy the
Good
rest
night.
of your day or your evening.
Yaakov, do you wanna stop the recording here, and if you guys want to continue on your own, then I guess do it separately. Otherwise, the recording's just gonna be so long that people are just gonna kind of like.
Yeah, it's almost
download
4 hours now.
Yeah,
so
it's
I'm
too
gonna
much.
stop the recording here, and I'm gonna sign off because
Yeah,
I'm like you. I haven't eaten since breakfast.
I'm starving.
It's already 7 p.m. here.
Should we go out with a quick song?
Yeah. So I like to say thank you to everyone who joined and participated. It was great. It's wonderful, man. I really loved it.
It really was. It's so amazing, really. And guys, please come back. You're welcome any time. It's really nice having you two guys. Really, seriously.
So wish everyone Shabbat Shalom, and
Shabbat Shalom,
and we'll see each other next Shabbat.
Sounds
good.
All right then. All right. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Torah.